Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. The Beginning of the Fusion of the Motherland. Chapter 1, 1962. A Secret CIA Base. Look, it's those freaks. Turns out freaks eat the same food as us. Then how did they become freaks? I don't know, maybe you can ask them yourself. Inside the restaurant, people walking around and eating in various corners couldn't help but look at the table of young people sitting in the northeast corner, pointing and talking. It's like watching a circus clown. I've had enough of these idiots. A boy with yellow curly hair couldn't help but slap the table, glanced around viciously and cursed in a low voice. Sean, you should be used to it by now. Sitting opposite the curly-haired boy, a girl with long black hair and a cicada wing-shaped tattoo on her arm was much calmer. I don't think I can get used to it. Sean shrugged and said to another blonde girl, Riven, maybe you can talk to Charles and ask him to modify the memories of these idiots, so that we don't have to be watched by them like animals in a zoo every day. Quote. Raven smiled at an Asian boy sitting next to her. I still think it's reliable to let Rorschach throw them all out one by one, right, Rorschach? Even though Luo Xia was pretty, and even had a bookish attitude like Hank, at first glance, I felt that the other person should be the top student in the school. However, everyone here knows what kind of power is contained in Rorschach's humble body. He can actually lift a car easily with one hand. Throwing out those big men weighing more than 100 kilograms is not much more difficult than throwing out a piece of garbage. Rorschach, however, Rorschach didn't give any response and seemed to be distracted, so Raven poked the other person's arm with her hand. Rorschach. Hearing this name, the Asian boy couldn't help but be stunned. I almost forgot. This is my name in this world. That's right. The Asian boy is not actually from this world, but a time traveler from the Blue Star. In the previous life, Rorschach actually had a pretty good life. After graduating from college, he worked in a local mid to upper tier enterprise. Because of his hard work and a little bit of luck, he was promoted to the middle level within 3 years and his annual income could reach 200,000 yuan. Not really rich, but already living better than most people. The only regret I have is that I was so busy with work that I neglected my personal issues, so that I was still single at the age of 28. But who would have thought that on the way to a blind date, it suddenly rained heavily and a bolt of lightning fell from the sky, and Luo Xia would be so lucky to win the prize. When he opened his eyes again, Rorschach discovered that he had actually appeared in another world and had become another person. To be honest, Rorschach was actually a little panicked at the beginning. Because he discovered that there are mutants, Captain America, and Howard Stark in this world. Of course, Captain America is no longer alive, but this does not prevent Captain America from becoming a national idol. Simply speaking, this is a world where there are gods, dimensional demons, and all kinds of crazy aliens, and crises can easily break out to destroy a city or even the entire Earth. Ordinary people live in such a world, and they might become cannon fodder and die without knowing how. Especially ordinary people living in New York. Fortunately, just like countless time travelers, Rorschach was also bound to a golden finger when he traveled through time. Host. Rorschach. Age. 16 years old. Speed. 53 meters per second. Power. 7.2 tons. Physique. 124. Average adult healthy male is 10. Mental strength. 82. Average adult healthy male, 10. Current template. Motherland unlock progress 1%. Ability. Clairvoyance elementary, superhearing elementary, flying unlocked, heat ray unlocked. Origin point. 0 point. With a thought in his mind, this attribute panel that only he could see appeared in front of Luo Xia's eyes. Frankly speaking, Rorschach didn't know what kind of system this was because the system didn't have a name. But the function of the system is still obvious, which is to allow Rorschach to acquire the abilities of a native of the motherland, and when Rorschach just crossed over, he gave Rorschach a novice gift package. 1% progress pack. Don't underestimate this 1%, but it directly gave Rorschach strength, speed, physique and mental power far beyond ordinary people. Although it is a bit unsatisfactory in the later era when the demons are dancing, don't forget that the first battle of the X-Men has not yet started. The mutants haven't even really surfaced yet and are not known to the world. Many people don't know that there is a group of mutants in the world, and even if they hear similar rumors, they will only treat it as a joke. Even Magneto and many other mutants think they are the only mutants in the world. This is why ordinary people in the CIA regard these mutants in the restaurant as clowns, rather than fear, disgust or rejection. As Sean said, he treats everyone more like monkeys. As for why Rorschach is in the CIA, this is because the future Professor X, Charles, has reached a cooperation with the CIA. In order to fight against the Black Emperor Shaw, Charles decided to form a mutant team. Rorschach and the future Siren, Angel, Darwin and Ravager were brought to this secret base one after another and became mutant agent candidates. Rorschach, what are you thinking about? Raven's voice sounded again, interrupting Rorschach's thoughts. Rorschach threw away the messy thoughts in his mind and replied casually, "Nothing, just a group of guys who sit in a well and look at the sky, don't pay attention to it." Sitting in a well and looking at the sky. Raven blinked her eyes. Rorschach, what does this mean? Who would sit in a well and look at the sky? Other people around also looked at Rorschach with incomprehension. A group of illiterates can't appreciate the profoundness of my Chinese culture. Rorschach complained in his heart and began to explain to everyone. This sentence means that the toad living at the bottom of the well thinks that there is only that well in the world. How can he know how vast the world outside the well is? I see, you are calling those people toads, the tattooed girl said with sudden enlightenment. Rorschach was completely speechless. Do you understand this innuendo? How vulgar it is to curse people. A very vivid metaphor. A voice sounded. The people who were eating subconsciously stopped what they were doing and looked at Eric, who suddenly appeared. Although Eric is not an official contact person of the CIA like Charles, Eric's strength is very strong. The specific affairs of the mutants are actually handled by Eric and Charles together. Although Eric only came a month or two earlier than them, everyone regards Eric as a senior. Of course, Eric is indeed much older. Eric, you're back. Raven was the first to join the CIA with Charles, and was also the first to know Eric, so her attitude was much more casual. How is it going? Is it going well? Raven couldn't help asking again. In the morning, Charles and Eric went to find another mutant to join the group. According to Charles, the mutant was likely to be a real warrior. Raven was still looking forward to it. Others also wanted to see who the mutant that Charles and others were optimistic about was. Except that he asked Charles and me to get out, nothing went wrong. Eric shrugged and said helplessly, "That guy smoking a cigar was so rude." "It doesn't matter. There are far more mutants in the world, aren't they?" Raven shrugged, not really taking it seriously. "That being said, in fact, we don't have that much time." Eric shook his head. Then he turned his eyes to Rorschach. "Rorschach, can you come to the office later? Charles and I have something to tell you." Rorschach was a little surprised, and he couldn't figure out what Eric and Charles would come to him for. According to his memory, the mutants who were brought to the CIA by Eric and Charles during this period had nothing to do except chatting and eating for free every day. Even when they really started to receive special training from Charles, it was after they were attacked by Black Emperor Shao, who basically slaughtered all the agents in the base. Before that, there should be nothing for them. And this is why Rorschach chose to follow Charles to this base. Here, he can train and develop his abilities without distraction. "I'm done, Eric, let's go now." After a little hesitation, Rorschach put away his thoughts and stood up. It's not that he and Eric are polite, but Rorschach is really almost done. Eric nodded, without saying anything more, and walked out of the restaurant with Rorschach. What do you think Eric and the others want to see Rorschach for? I don't know, but Rorschach is obviously not the same kind of person as us. What kind of person is he? Man, can you control your abilities as perfectly as Rorschach? Raven and the others looked at the backs of Rorschach and Eric as they left, and couldn't help but start talking about why Eric came to see Rorschach. But after guessing, they couldn't figure out 1, 2, 3, 4. While everyone was discussing heatedly, Rorschach had already arrived in Charles's office. "Rorschach, sit down, coffee or tea?" Charles smiled and gestured to Rorschach, making people feel like they were in the spring breeze. This is a man with the atmosphere of British aristocracy, who is also very handsome, and coupled with the unique elegance of intellectuals, Charles has a special charm. Eric, who stood aside casually with his arms folded, is a completely different feeling. He has a wild and unruly look, like a sword hidden in a scabbard. Although he hides his edge, he still cannot be ignored. Thank you, Professor. I'm fine like this. Rorschach sat down in front of Charles. Are you used to living here? Is there anything you are not used to? Charles asked Rorschach about his situation with concern, like a gentle elder. Everything is fine. This is a great place. Rorschach nodded and told the truth. That's good. Charles nodded with great satisfaction. Professor, what do you want me to do? After a brief greeting, Rorschach asked about the business. Rorschach, I've noticed you. You're different from the other kids. You're much more mature than them. Sometimes I even subconsciously forget your age and think of you as someone like me and Eric. Of course, you're not just mentally mature. You're also the only one among them who can perfectly control your abilities. I don't even know how you do it. When Eric and I were your age, we couldn't reach this level. Considering these facts, I think it's time for you to know something. Charles weighed his words and told Rorschach. Rorschach, do you know the real purpose of our visit? Eric interrupted at this time. Isn't it that mutants stick together for warmth? Rorschach asked back as a matter of course. This reason was exactly why Charles and the others pulled those mutants into the group. This is just one of the purposes. Eric stood up straight, his face became serious, or rather, this is just the first step, to verify your identity. After verifying your identity, we plan to train and test you, and eventually we will eliminate some of the unqualified ones. Eric, I don't understand. Combined with the plot in his memory, Rorschach actually knew exactly what Eric was talking about, but he could only ask knowingly. Rorschach, we are recruiting agents. Special agents composed of some mutants. Eric explained to Rorschach again. No, Eric, we are not recruiting agents. Charles immediately corrected Eric on the side. We just need some mutants with combat qualities at the current stage to perform some special tasks to fight some special enemies, and this confrontation is also temporary. There is no qualified or unqualified, even those mutants who are not selected by us can stay. So Charles, you called me here this time to test me in advance. Rorschach raised his eyebrows. No, you have passed the test, or you are the same as Eric, and you don't need to be tested. Charles smiled. As I said, you can perfectly control your abilities, and your strength is not bad. Rorschach, Charles has more important things to deal with, and he really can't spare the time, so the next mutant recruitment work will be done by you and me. What do you think? Eric explained their purpose on the side. Since you believe me, I have no objection. Rorschach hesitated for a moment and agreed. After all, he has lived here for so long for nothing, and it is right to contribute at the right time. Thank you for your understanding, Rorschach. Charles nodded with great satisfaction, then rummaged through his desk and took out a document. He handed it over. This is your next target. Rorschach took the document and looked at it, feeling a little surprised. The avatar on the document looked very familiar to him, and he had definitely seen it before. It turned out to be him. After some thought, Rorschach finally remembered who the guy named Chris Bradley was. It turned out that the other party was an old comrade of Wolverine Logan. He used to do some shameful things under Stryker's command with Wolverine, Sabretooth, Ghost, Meatball and others. But later, for some unknown reason, like Wolverine, he also left Stryker and lived in seclusion in an amusement park, using his abilities to cheat people and make a living. The final result didn't seem very good, as if he was killed by Sabretooth. Is he going to recruit this person this time? It's just that this person's ability doesn't seem to be too strong. He can control electric current, but according to the performance in the movie, it is limited to charging the elevator without power and making the light bulb without power on, that's all. There is no combat power at all. Rorschach, is there a problem? Eric's voice sounded, and he stared at Rorschach and asked. Although he was a little worried about whether it was a corpse, he couldn't say such words anyway. Rorschach immediately shook his head. No problem. Good. Go back and prepare, we will leave in half an hour. Eric nodded to Rorschach, pushed the door and walked out of Charles's office. Charles, if there is nothing else, I will go back too. Rorschach also stood up. Rorschach, I told you so much before, aren't you curious about what kind of enemy we are going to deal with? Charles glanced at Rorschach and asked leisurely. For Charles, who has psychic abilities, ordinary people rarely have any secrets in front of him. Even if he doesn't deliberately read other people's memories, he can feel other people's emotions. But for some reason, Charles found that his ability was completely ineffective against Rorschach. Charles had no idea what Rorschach was thinking. When I know it, I will know it naturally, right? Rorschach smiled, didn't say anything more, and also got up and left. Charles couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Although Rorschach was very young, he was more stable than he thought. It seemed that some things could indeed be handed over to him. Xiao's activities were becoming more and more frequent, but there was a psychic around him who could completely block Charles's perception. This meant that the brainwave enhancer was completely useless in front of Xiao, and Charles could only cooperate with the CIA to investigate through conventional methods. This was a long and complicated job, and with some other things, Charles was really a bit overwhelmed. If Rorschach heard Charles's thoughts, he would definitely laugh out loud. He was so stable, he just knew who Charles was going to deal with. Hey, Rorschach, back to the apartment. Several mutants who were playing poker in the hall turned their heads and greeted him. Rorschach, what did Eric call you over for? Raven threw a card in her hand and stretched her head to look at Rorschach and asked. Go find someone, I think, maybe we will have a new companion. Rorschach had nothing to hide. Really, I wonder who will come this time. Great, have you found a new mutant? Everyone was very excited when they heard that someone else was coming. After all, mutants and ordinary people are strictly speaking two species. The sense of identity between the same species is like meeting your fellow countrymen in a foreign country. It can't be expressed in words. And Rorschach is also a mutant, which means that he and those ordinary people are naturally in an opposing position. Rorschach, why are you going? The tattooed girl asked strangely, with a little sour tone. Everyone came in at about the same time. Why did Eric and the others look at Rorschach differently? Is it because of Rorschach's strength? I can fly and spit corrosive liquids. Maybe Eric is short of a driver. Rorschach shrugged, didn't say anything more, and went straight back to his room. After changing clothes and packing up, it was almost time. Rorschach and Eric met up. Eric, Rorschach. Both parties greeted each other briefly, got into the car, and started to rush to the destination. Rorschach, can I ask you a question? On the way. Eric casually turned the steering wheel and glanced at Rorschach seemingly unintentionally. Of course, Eric, what do you want to ask? Rorschach naturally would not refuse. In fact, he was also very curious about what Eric would ask him. Do you think humans and mutants can really understand each other and live together? Eric asked such a sharp question right away. Charles believes this. What about you? I don't know. Rorschach shook his head. He is still a child now, at least in Eric's eyes, so such a profound question naturally would not have any profound insights. But look at the black people and minorities living in America. They are still not really accepted. I think that even if Charles's vision can be realized, there is still a long way to go. Why do you ask? Just chatting. Eric gently changed the subject. Chatting. Rorschach couldn't help but glance at Eric. He didn't think Eric was chatting, but seemed to be testing his attitude towards some things. But Rorschach didn't take this matter to heart. The car continued to move forward slowly, everything was normal. Springfield, Ohio. In an amusement park with flashing lights and bustling voices. Bradley sat listlessly in his stall like a big orange basking in the sun. Hey, how do you play this? Until a couple appeared in front of him, he finally opened his eyes, but saw the blonde girl staring at the light bulb in front of Bradley with great interest and asked. It's very simple. Turn off the light and you can get the prize. You can try twice for $1. Bradley explained for the other party. It sounds like this prize is easy to win. The blonde girl immediately paid the money and turned off the light eagerly. Snap. The switch was turned off directly. The light bulb was still brightly lit. Of course, this is too obvious. The blonde girl unplugged the power supply, but the light was still on. The blonde girl was a little confused. The blonde girl's boyfriend came over and unscrewed the light bulb in a few seconds. But something weird happened, the light bulb still didn't go out. Freak. The couple was obviously scared. The man couldn't help but cursed and quickly pulled the blonde girl away. It seems that our Thunder Man is doing very well. What do you think, Zero? In the crowd of the amusement park, the saber-toothed tiger grinned at Zero beside him, looking a little ferocious. After saying this, Sabretooth began to walk towards Bradley with big strides. Snap. Zero grabbed Sabretooth's hand and whispered to him, Victor, it's not the right time yet. There are too many people in the amusement park. What does it matter? Do you think anyone will stop me? Sabretooth said with a nonchalant look on his face. Zero. Of course, no one would come to stop him. Zero didn't mean that. He just warned Sabretooth not to be too high profile. Killing people in front of so many people would bring a lot of trouble. If there is, then kill them all together. Sabretooth continued in a low and vicious tone. Victor, don't make trouble. You know how much the commander values the plan. Let's wait until the evening when there are fewer people before we start. Zero persuaded Sabretooth in a big way. You use Striker to pressure me. Sabretooth stretched out his hand and grabbed Zero's neck and lifted him up. Zero only felt that his neck was about to be broken, and his face was flushed due to lack of oxygen. He struggled to force out a sentence from his mouth. Don't get me wrong, I'm just offering a suggestion. The saber-toothed tiger just looked up and stared at Zero for 2 or 3 seconds, then put him down. Ahem. Zero immediately coughed loudly on the side. Really, this will make it less fun. The saber-toothed tiger said dissatisfiedly, but he also listened to Zero's advice and stopped. Anyway, it was already dark, and the amusement park would be closed soon. Many business places in the United States would close early at night because no one had the habit of wandering around at night. After all, this is a free country, and the amusement park is no exception. Almost an hour later, the tourists in the amusement park began to leave one after another, and the various stores in the amusement park also began to close their stalls. ... Squeak. A black car slowly stopped outside the amusement park, and the figures of Eric and Rorschach got out of the car one after another. This is it, right? Eric looked around, then took out the address on the document and checked it carefully to confirm that it was correct. The two began to walk into the amusement park. It was just the end of the show, and there were basically no tourists in the amusement park except for the small bosses who were cleaning up. Old man, where is Bradley? When passing the entrance of a roller coaster, Eric looked at an old man who was locking the door and asked, What do you want to see him for? The old man was quite alert and did not tell Eric the answer immediately, but glanced at the two. Eric's eyes lit up. After asking several people, he finally found someone who knew Bradley. I am from the same hometown as him, and I have something to do with him. Eric lied without blinking. Oh, so you can find him if you keep going east. His place is at the easternmost part. Thank you, old man. Eric and Rorschach followed the old man's instructions and kept going east. Sure enough, they soon saw a small man packing things in the distance. It looked like Bradley in the portrait. Rorschach secretly complained that he was lucky. Bradley had not been killed by Sabretooth. But suddenly, Eric stopped and turned his head suddenly as if he had discovered something. He looked to the left front. Rorschach also looked in the direction of Eric and saw two big men smoking next to the carousel. That was Sabretooth and Zero. Eric did not recognize the two men, but Rorschach recognized them at a glance. There was no doubt that these two men were here to kill Bradley. Okay, I take back what I said before about my good luck. However, despite recognizing the identities of the two people, Rorschach calmly retracted his gaze. He did not take the two people to heart. With his current strength, saber-toothed tigers and the like are not enough. Eric, those two people don't look like the staff here. Rorschach reminded Eric. Don't worry about them, let's go. Eric also retracted his gaze, called Rorschach, and continued to move forward. As he said, no matter where the two came from, as long as they didn't come to interfere with his own business, Eric didn't bother to pay attention. Soon, the two came to Bradley's side. Excuse me, Mr. Bradley, I'm Eric, this is Rorschach, can we talk? Eric said to Bradley. Bradley stopped what he was doing and looked at Eric and Rorschach with a suspicious look. We don't know each other. Bradley's face immediately showed a trace of vigilance. We don't know each other, but it doesn't matter, because we will know each other soon. Eric smiled at Bradley. At the same time, he activated his ability and waved his hand at the performance prop in Bradley's hand, and the prop floated up directly. You are also. Yes, I am also a mutant. Eric said heavily. Another mutant. The saber-toothed tiger on the side saw this scene and couldn't help but feel surprised. But then, His expression turned a little cruel. 0, I didn't expect there was an unexpected gain. It seems we are very lucky. During this period, Sabertooth Tiger's mission is to help Stryker find more mutants and capture more mutants, regardless of life or death. He didn't expect that someone would bring him a pillow as soon as he fell asleep, and he would pick up a mutant for nothing. No, it should be 2. Since the big man is a mutant, most of the young people around him are probably mutants too. Not bad, very good. When you finish smoking this cigarette, go and kill them all. The saber-toothed tiger smiled even more proudly. Eric on the side naturally didn't notice the movements of the saber-toothed tiger. His attention was focused on Bradley at the moment. After Bradley saw that Eric was his compatriot, his attitude really changed. Come in and talk. After Bradley hesitated for a moment, he took Eric into his house. I didn't expect to see my own kind in a place like this. After greeting the two of them to sit down, Bradley looked at the two of them quite unexpectedly and said he hadn't seen a mutant in almost 5 years since leaving Stryker. Where I come from, there are more compatriots, Eric immediately said to Bradley, and we also welcome you to join. We hope that all mutant brothers and sisters can unite together. You mean, you are from a mutant organization? Bradley's tone changed somewhat. He finally escaped from a mutant organization or something, so how could he join it again? He didn't want to have anything to do with any mutant organization. It's almost similar, you can understand it that way. After thinking for a while, Eric nodded. He hasn't figured out Bradley's basic attitude yet, so naturally he won't just take it out on him. Sorry, I think we have nothing to talk about. Please leave. Bradley, who was still polite at first, suddenly stood up and ordered the two of them to be kicked out very coldly. Mr. Bradley, maybe it's not too late for you to listen to what I have to say before making a decision. Eric tried to save him. No need, I'm sorry to make you two go on a wasted trip. But Bradley's attitude is still very determined. Eric said nothing more. He and Rorschach next to him looked at each other, and then they both stood up. Planning to leave right now. Since people don't appreciate it, why should they show their warm face to others' cold buttocks? Squeak. The two pushed the door open, but no one expected that a rugged man in a black trench coat and a beard stood outside the door. It was the guy who had looked at each other from a distance while smoking a cigarette. Saber-toothed tiger. Is this over? Why, it doesn't look like the conversation was very pleasant. The saber-toothed tiger grinned at several people, and there was a sense of oppression all over his body. Victor. After Bradley saw the person clearly, his expression changed slightly. During those days when he was operating with saber-toothed tiger, Bradley witnessed Victor's abnormality with his own eyes. He was a murderous madman. Bradley, aren't you happy to see your old friend? The saber-toothed tiger glanced sideways at Bradley. Excuse me, could you please give me a chance? Eric saw that the saber-toothed tiger had blocked all the doors, and couldn't help but frown and said to the other party. No, don't say you're sorry. The saber-toothed tiger stretched out a finger on his right hand and waved it in front of him, because it's me who's embarrassed. Really, why are you embarrassed? Eric raised his eyebrows. No matter how stupid he was, he still understood that something was wrong with the guy in front of him. Hey, the saber-toothed tiger didn't say anything, grinned, and the 5 fingers of his hands began to grow sharp claws outwards. No one of you can leave today. The saber-toothed tiger took a step forward, walked into the house, and closed the door. New task generation. The mission is as follows. Foil saber-toothed tiger's actions and protect Thunder Man Bradley from being killed. Task reward. 100 origin points. At this moment, a few lines of words suddenly popped up on Rorschach's system panel. Rorschach couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. But then, there was a burst of excitement. The system actually released a task. And if there are tasks, there are naturally rewards. With rewards, you can quickly improve your strength. Although Rorschach does not currently understand what the system's reward origin point is, it does not matter, and it does not hinder Rorschach's enthusiasm for completing this mission. Saber-toothed tiger, it seems I can't even kill you. Bang 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 bang. The sound of objects ringing was heard, and all the metal objects in the room began to fly into the air under Eric's control, just suspended in the air. It's like Eric's patron saint. It looks truly spectacular. He, Magneto, is not a soft persimmon. I hope you can bring me some fun. A ferocious smile appeared on the saber-toothed tiger's face, and he jumped on the ground like a ferocious beast, then rushed towards Eric. Whoosh whoosh. The metals suspended in the air, under Eric's control, shot towards the saber-toothed tiger quickly like sharp swords. Bang bang bang. The saber-toothed tiger simply transformed into a wild beast, waving its two claws continuously, and one object after another was knocked away and smashed to pieces. Things like TVs and cabinets were like paper in front of a saber-toothed tiger, and they were completely useless. The saber-toothed tiger rode the wind and waves all the way with such fierceness, it was called fierce. But Eric was not a vegetarian. One piece of metal after another kept shooting at the saber-toothed tiger. No matter how powerful the saber-toothed tiger is, it is impossible to evade them all. Tisk tisk tisk. Several table knives, under Eric's control, pierced the saber-toothed tiger's abdomen. Success. Eric's face couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy. Roar. But the next moment, a beast-like roar came from the mouth of the saber-toothed tiger. The opponent's vital parts were pierced, but he seemed to be fine. He leapt suddenly, and the last distance was crossed instantly, and he came to Eric in the blink of an eye. His right hand was waved high, and the sharp claws on it began to slash hard at Eric. Eric's pupils shrank suddenly, and at the critical moment he suddenly controlled a metal cabinet to block in front of him. Boom! The saber-toothed tiger's sharp claws suddenly hit the metal cabinet, directly deforming the metal cabinet. The Eric behind him felt as if he had been hit by a big hammer. His body shook and he flew backwards. At this time, Eric had not yet received special training with Charles. He was not yet Magneto in the future, and his strength was not that strong. In addition, the space in Bradley's house was too limited, and there were not many metal objects that Eric could control, which led to Eric's rapid defeat. Ahem. Eric felt that his sternum was almost broken, and his breath was stuck in his chest and his brain was a little confused. Go to hell. But the saber-toothed tiger didn't give Eric a chance to breathe, and pounced on him again like a beast. The sharp claws continued to swing down mercilessly. Although Stryker's order was to kill or kill, for the bloodthirsty saber-toothed tiger, unless it was a target that Stryker explicitly asked to keep alive, he would usually kill it directly. After all, for Stryker's research, taking the serum back was the same. Seeing that the saber-toothed tiger was about to pounce in front of Eric, he suddenly felt that his eyes were blurred. It was the young man who he had never taken seriously before, who appeared in front of Eric incredibly quickly. He punched the saber-toothed tiger directly in the chest. Crack! The sound of broken bones was heard immediately, and the huge body of the saber-toothed tiger was smashed out like a cannonball. With a loud bang, a big hole was knocked out of Bradley's wall, and it fell hard on the ground outside. It slid a long way on the ground before stopping. The scene suddenly became quiet. A series of astonished eyes were all on Rorschach's face. This kid is so strong. Eric, are you okay? Ignoring the surprised looks of others, Rorschach walked slowly to Eric's side and held out his hand to him. I'm fine. Eric's face was a little embarrassed. He didn't expect that he would fall in front of a junior. He held Rorschach's hand unnaturally. Rorschach pulled Eric up. Eric, keep an eye on Bradley, leave this guy to me. No, Rorschach, this guy is a real bloodthirsty beast. Eric shook his head. He knew that Rorschach was powerful, and Rorschach's punch to knock down the saber-toothed tiger was also a good proof, but life and death fighting is not just about strength. Especially the guy on the opposite side. Eric could see at a glance that the other party was an executioner with blood on his hands. That was not something that an unsophisticated young man could deal with. Eric, believe me, he is nothing to me. Rorschach smiled, with a nonchalant look on his face. Then he ignored Eric and walked towards the saber-toothed tiger with big strides. Although Eric was still a little worried, he was different from Charles. Charles would definitely stop Rorschach in this situation, but Eric thought it might be a good thing to let Rorschach experience some hardships. Since the other party insisted, why not give him this opportunity? Anyway, Eric will be on the side to scout for Rorschach. If there is any emergency, will he just stand by and watch? Eric even has a little appreciation for Rorschach in his heart. This young man is different from those other children. He is fearless and brave. Only those with this kind of mentality can grow into a truly powerful warrior. Cough cough. A cough sounded. But the saber-toothed tiger climbed up in a mess, with blood hanging from the corner of his mouth and a large part of his chest sunken directly. He tore open his shirt, only to see that his chest was covered in blood and flesh, which looked shocking. If an ordinary person had been hit by Rorschach's punch, he would have been dead. Well, Sabretooth wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and his expression looked a little crazy. This is a really powerful punch, but what's the point? As Sabretooth said this, the muscles on his chest squirmed, and the terrible wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It took only a few seconds to recover. Except for some blood stains, it seemed as if he had never been injured. He casually pulled out the knife stuck in his abdomen and threw it on the ground, which was so relaxed. Eric's face suddenly became ugly. No wonder he stabbed this guy twice before and he was fine. It turned out that this guy actually had such a terrible self-healing ability. This will make things troublesome. Zero, who was not far away, was still standing there calmly, looking like he was just watching the fun, and had no intention of coming to help. First, Sabretooth didn't like being disturbed when he was fighting. Second, Zero was also very clear about how abnormal Sabretooth's self-healing ability was, so he was not worried at all. Even if the enemy suppressed him for a move or two, Sabretooth could kill the enemy by just relying on self-healing. You made me feel the pain I haven't felt for a long time, so I decided to let you taste the pain before killing you. Sabretooth pointed at Rorschach with his claw-like fingers, and then used his hands and feet to rush towards Rorschach again like a wild beast. Rorschach! Eric behind him couldn't help shouting. I can handle it. Before he finished speaking, Rorschach shook his body and rushed towards Sabretooth as well. His speed was so fast that Eric almost couldn't keep up with his rhythm. You should know that Rorschach's average speed can reach more than 50 meters per second. What does this mean? The maximum speed allowed on the highway is only 120 kilometers per hour, which is only 33 meters per second. That was in the future. Rorschach was almost twice as fast as this. Swish! In a blink of an eye, Rorschach came in front of the saber-toothed tiger. A huge airflow came, which was caused by Rorschach's excessive speed, making the saber-toothed tiger feel that his breathing could not help but stagnate. Then, he felt that his eyes were blurred. Rorschach's fist swept directly to the side of the saber-toothed tiger's head. So fast, the saber-toothed tiger was secretly surprised. However, relying on his extremely powerful self-healing ability, the saber-toothed tiger did not really take Rorschach's attack to heart. He also opened his claws and grabbed Rorschach's chest fiercely. It was exactly the same as Wolverine's fighting style, both of which were to exchange injuries for injuries and grind the opponent to death. It was a pity that this move might be useful for ordinary people, but it was completely useless in front of Rorschach. Because he couldn't hurt Rorschach. Bang! The saber-toothed tiger's claws were still some distance away from Rorschach's chest, and Rorschach's fist had already hit the saber-toothed tiger's head. The saber-toothed tiger's body was ejected again like a cannonball, flying dozens of meters away and hitting the ground hard. It was motionless from then on. If someone looks closely, they will find that the saber-toothed tiger's head has been severely deformed, and blood is flowing out of all 7 orifices. It looks like a horror movie scene. Fortunately, the saber-toothed tiger's physical fitness is far superior to that of ordinary people. If it were an ordinary person, his head would have exploded long ago. You have to know that Rorschach's punch has a force of more than 7 tons, which is equivalent to being run over by a medium-sized truck. What kind of head can withstand such a destruction? Even the saber-toothed tiger was beaten unconscious by Rorschach. Shit, this is not good. Zero cursed in a low voice, his face full of solemnity and surprise. Zero didn't know how the saber-toothed tiger was beaten before, but he could see clearly how the saber-toothed tiger was abused now. The saber-toothed tiger is no match for the opponent. The two are not on the same level at all. If it weren't for the super strong self-healing ability, the saber-toothed tiger would have died long ago. Zero couldn't stand it anymore. Bang! He didn't say anything nonsense, and shot at Rorschach with a shake of his hand. But Eric on the side was not a pushover. He suddenly stretched out his hand towards the bullet shot by Zero, and activated his ability, and the opponent's bullet froze next to Rorschach. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At the same time, Eric also began to control some metal objects, including the bullets shot by Zero, and smashed them towards Zero. Bang bang bang. While Zero was dodging quickly, he kept pulling the trigger at Eric. The two sides started fighting fiercely. No matter how powerful Zero's bullets are, they are restrained in front of Eric, so Rorschach is not worried about Eric. He looked at Saber-toothed Tiger, whose head was recovering rapidly, and fell into deep thought. With the saber-toothed tiger's abnormal self-healing power, it is still very difficult to defeat the opponent with just fists. You can't just beat people into a pulp, right? That would be a bit too perverted. With this thought in his mind, Rorschach's eyes swept around the scene, and finally fell on the two table knives that Eric used to impale the saber-toothed tiger and were thrown to the ground by the saber-toothed tiger. Luo Sha didn't hesitate, walked over calmly, picked up one of the table knives, and weighed it in his hand. Even if the saber-toothed tiger could heal itself, if he cut off its head with a knife, he would definitely be dead, right? Saber-toothed tiger is not Deadpool, he can regenerate his severed limbs. The only thing that needs to be considered is the quality of this knife good? I don't know if I can reach the point where I can't stop beating garlic. But the reality no longer gave Rorschach any chance to think about it. At this moment, the saber-toothed tiger was resurrected again with full health. The wildness in his body also completely burst out, with a ferocious smile on his face and the blood on his face, like a big devil coming out of hell. He rushed towards Rorschach again. Rorschach used his superhuman speed to dodge easily, moved to the side of the saber-toothed tiger, held the knife tightly in his hand, and slashed across it. Clang! A cold light flashed. Laugh! The saber-toothed tiger's head flew out directly, and the blood from his neck spurted high like a fountain. It was a spectacle. Due to the huge inertia, the headless body of the saber-toothed tiger ran forward 2 more steps before falling hard to the ground. And his head drew a graceful arc in the air, flew dozens of meters away, and landed on the lawn like a ball. You killed Victor. Bradley stared blankly at the body of the saber-toothed tiger, feeling a little dazed. How could a beast like Victor be killed so easily by this young man? He really didn't expect that this young man who even looked a little bookish could be so powerful. If he can't regrow a head, then I think he's dead. Rorschach shrugged. Well, there was a muffled groan not far away, but Magneto had already finished it. Zero was hit by several bullets fired by himself. His eyes widened and he fell to the ground in despair. He went to reunite with his dear good teammate Saber-toothed Tiger. After all, good brothers have to be neat and tidy. The mission is completed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 100 origin points. Origin point, as the name suggests, is the source of power used by the host to advance, strengthen, upgrade and grow. Come and go on a journey of upgrading and strengthening. At the same moment, Rorschach also heard such a prompt in his mind. At the same time, a series of relevant information about the origin point also popped up. In short, as the system says, the origin point is the origin of Rorschach's growth and evolution. It can be used to unlock the progress of the motherland template, or it can be added to one of its own attributes to enhance a single attribute. It can even be used directly to unlock or upgrade Rorschach's current abilities. In a word, Rorschach's growth cannot be separated from the origin point. Rorschach, I really didn't see that you were so violent. Eric walked to Rorschach's side. He looked down at the headless body of the saber-toothed tiger and spread his hands. It's just that the blood spurted out a bit, but actually, I believe he died peacefully without any pain. Luo Sha said seriously. This is really not Rorschach's bragging. With the speed of his knife, even a piece of paper can cut through flesh and blood. The head of a saber-toothed tiger was severed in an instant. The saber-toothed tiger probably didn't even realize what was going on, and his head was already flying in the air. With the tenacious vitality of the saber-toothed tiger, he might even be able to experience the feeling of flying into the sky. Are you okay? Eric stared at Rorschach again and asked, this time without beating around the bush. The purpose of his deliberate teasing with Rorschach just now was to ease the atmosphere. After all, murder would have a certain psychological impact on any young man. I'm fine. Rorschach shook his head. Although it was the first time in his 2 lives that he had killed someone, he actually didn't have much fluctuation in his heart. He himself felt a little surprised. If you want to talk to me, you can anytime. Eric patted Rorschach on the shoulder, and then looked at Bradley on the side. Who are they two? Man, I'm afraid you're in trouble. Bradley's face became extremely serious. Really? What kind of trouble? Eric asked in a deep voice. He could see this without Bradley having to tell him. The one with claws on his hands is called Victor, and the other one is called Zero. We all call him Zero. They come from a very secretive organization, a very secretive and very dangerous organization. Bradley pondered for a moment and said what he could. What kind of organization? Eric raised his brows, and his gaze suddenly became sharp, hitting Bradley in the face like a knife. Bradley's anus couldn't help but tighten. This guy suddenly became so scary. Let me ask you what kind of organization you are. Eric grabbed Bradley's collar and growled, is it Shao? According to the information Eric has, the mutant power he knows about organized into forces as Black Emperor Shao's Hellfire Club. Shao? No, man, who is Shao? Don't play tricks on me, tell me if it's Shao. Man, I've never heard of Shao. Let me go. No, you're lying to me. Eric, calm down. Seeing that Eric was obviously excited, Rorschach couldn't help but stop him. I don't think he is lying. Not just a feeling, Rorschach, but an affirmation. The secret organization Bradley mentioned was created by Stryker, not Black Emperor Shao. He'd better not. Eric looked at Rorschach, and then let Bradley go. Man, if I were you, I would get out of here as fast as I can, the faster the better. Bradley tidied his clothes. Although Eric made him a little unhappy, he still reminded him solemnly. Because Bradley had long heard rumors that saber-toothed tigers were hunting these breakaways. So strictly speaking, these two mutants who appeared out of nowhere actually saved his life. You come with us. Eric grabbed Bradley's arm without any explanation and forced Bradley to his car. Facing a powerful mutant like Eric who can kill Zero with his bare hands, and a companion who can easily kill a saber-toothed tiger, what else can Bradley do? Even if you are reluctant, what choice do you have? What's more, with both saber-toothed tiger and Zero dead, Stryker will definitely not give up, and Bradley is destined to embark on the road to escape. From this perspective, it seems that being captured by another mutant organization is not a bad thing. At least it won't be easy for Stryker to find him, right? After thinking about it this way, Bradley calmed down and followed Eric and Rorschach to their secret base without causing any trouble. The entrance to the base. Agent Mora, who had received the news early, had been waiting at the door with several CIA agents and Charles. Eric, is this the guy? After Agent Mora looked at Bradley, he couldn't help showing a suspicious look on his face. Eric said that he had caught a suspect from the Hellfire Club, but this little man looked nothing like him. He is not. Charles shook his head aside and said decisively. He has read Bradley's memory and can confirm that the other party is not Shao's person. Charles, are you sure? Eric walked up to Charles very reluctantly, looked at Charles and asked, have you used your ability? Sorry Eric, but he really isn't. Charles shook his head. Eric suddenly showed a very disappointed look, and kicked away a pebble at his feet in frustration. He had been tracking Shaw for so many years, and the only time he had succeeded was on a cruise ship almost 2 months ago. That time, he mercilessly assassinated Shao, not only allowing him to escape, but also almost costing his own life. If Charles hadn't stopped him, Eric would have drowned in the cold water. In the past 2 months, the most important reason why Eric agreed to stay with Charles in the CIA was that he could use the CIA's resources to investigate Shao. But who wants to get nothing for 2 months? Now I finally caught someone, but in the end I caught the wrong person. How could Eric not be depressed? Mora couldn't help but sigh. Shaw is not only the target of Eric and Charles, but also the target of their CIA. This is an opportunity for the two sides to cooperate. I have long said that no matter who you think I am, you all think it is wrong. Bradley immediately defended himself. You have arrested the wrong person. Yes, we arrested the wrong person. Charles is a person who admits his mistakes and apologized to Bradley. If my friends and I have caused you any trouble, I apologize to you. Save it. Bradley shrugged. He didn't care. I guess I can't leave either, right? No matter what kind of organization this is, if an outsider knows the location of their base, it is naturally impossible for them to leave at will. After all, Bradley had hung out with Stryker, so he wasn't that naive. Things are not as simple as you think. Charles did not deny this. He turned to glance at Mora and Eric. I think we may have encountered some trouble. Go in and talk. Agent Mora and Charles exchanged a look, and a group of people entered the base in a hurry. After taking Bradley down and sending someone to keep him under strict supervision, Mora, Charles and Eric met in the office. "Charles, what is going on?" Agent Mora immediately asked impatiently. "Wait a moment." Before Charles could speak, Eric suddenly spoke first and made a suggestion. "How about calling Rorschach in?" "Isn't it too early?" Charles hesitated slightly. He also wanted to wait until afterward to talk to Eric about Rorschach's field performance before deciding how open he would be to Rorschach. "Charles, he is already involved. Once involved, he has no way out. What's more, I think he is ready," Eric said in a very sure tone. Charles was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that Eric would have such high regard for Rorschach just after he went out to perform a mission. But Charles also trusted Eric very much, and he immediately shrugged. "If Mora doesn't mind." Mora Mactag, CIA secret agent. While investigating the Black Emperor, he discovered an incredible group of mutants, so he consulted Charles, an expert in genetics, about related issues. As a result, the two parties reached a cooperation. Since then, Agent Mora has become one of the mutants' most trusted allies, as well as Charles's young love. It's just that there are some bumps in the relationship between the two of them. "Rorschach, is that the young man who went out with Eric yesterday?" Mora couldn't help but ask. "It seems that he is the one you and Eric have chosen." "Is he the only one?" "He is the only one at the moment, but I believe this is only temporary." Charles nodded. "Okay." Mora pondered for a moment and agreed. He himself is a participant in this matter. "Charles, ask him to come in." "Sorry, Mora, my ability doesn't work on Rorschach, so please send someone to invite Rorschach over." Charles said helplessly. "Not working. Rorschach is also a psychic." Mora was surprised. "I thought he was a power-type psychic." "To be honest, I don't know. He is completely different from other psychics I have seen." Charles shook his head. Back on the ship, he and the White Queen had fought in the air, and the other party completely blocked his perception. Charles can clearly sense the White Queen's psychic ability, but Rorschach, he doesn't know how his ability doesn't work. What an interesting guy. Mora was really curious about Rorschach, and immediately ordered a subordinate to call Rorschach. Rorschach soon appeared in front of everyone. "Rorschach, this is Agent Mora, I believe you should have heard of him." Charles briefly introduced Rorschach. Although this base is a CIA base, in fact, unless some low-level special agents are stationed, people like Mora rarely show up. "Agent Mora, nice to meet you." "Me too." The two parties exchanged a simple greeting and sat down. "Okay, now that everyone is here, let's officially get started." Charles tapped the table lightly with his hand, attracting everyone's attention. "Bradley is not from Shaw, but from a secret military task force." "Yes, that task force is a mutant task force. And they have been doing some illegal things for a long time." Under the gaze of everyone, Charles spoke slowly. He told everyone the relevant memories he read from Bradley's mind. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became depressed. This matter actually involved military forces, which is indeed troublesome. In other words, Rorschach and I killed 2 mutant agents of the military and captured one alive. Eric raised his eyebrows and felt quite troubled. "Eric, you killed someone. What's going on? I thought you were just going to chat with others, just like you have been doing before." Agent Mora was confused. "It's just a recruitment job, how could it cause a death?" "Agent Mora, we are just defending ourselves." Rorschach explained seriously. "They wanted to kill us for no reason, and we had no choice." Then, Rorschach briefly introduced the situation on the scene to Mora and Charles. After Mora heard it, her brows furrowed deeply, like an old chrysanthemum blooming in late autumn. It was obvious that the other 2 agents went to silence the defected agent. Eric and Rorschach were just involved in it accidentally. This matter was of great importance. Mora and his men did not dare to neglect it, and immediately ordered people to bring Bradley over for interrogation. However, Bradley kept his mouth shut, and no matter how Mora interrogated him, he did not say a word. In the end, it was Charles who used his ability to read Bradley's memory and got more information from Bradley. William Stryker, Mora, the person who formed that mutant task force was William Stryker. Charles's face became even uglier. "William Stryker, you mean, the son of Commander Stryker?" Mora also looked like he was screwed. As a senior CIA agent, Mora knew very well that the name of the deputy director of the CIA's operations department was Jason Stryker. And Jason Stryker's son was also named William Stryker. This matter really got out of hand. In the conference room of the CIA headquarters, Agent Mora took Charles to report the existence of mutants to a group of CIA executives, and they were undoubtedly sprayed to death. Even the CIA director almost sent Mora to the typing group. In the end, it was Raven who performed a cross-dressing show on the spot, which successfully convinced the executives of the existence of mutants. And those executives who mocked Mora included Jason Stryker. As a result, everyone only found out now that Jason Stryker's son had secretly formed a mutant task force. Why did Jason Stryker pretend to be confused? Or did he not know what his son was doing? Everyone even dared not to think about it. The water behind this matter was too deep, and everyone was afraid that if they were not careful, they would all be swallowed into the huge vortex. The scene fell into silence for a while, and the atmosphere became more and more depressing. "Rorschach, you go back first." After a moment, Charles's voice sounded, and he said to Rorschach, "But remember, don't disclose what happened today to anyone." "I understand, Charles." Rorschach nodded, greeted Mora and Eric, and stood up. "Rorschach." When he walked to the door, Charles's voice sounded again behind him. When Rorschach looked over, Charles said seriously, "Don't worry, we will solve it." The voice was not loud, but it seemed to have a kind of magic, which made people feel convinced involuntarily. This is the charm of Charles's personality. "Of course, Charles." Rorschach pushed the door open and walked out. Although everyone in the office was frowning about the mess they had made, Rorschach really didn't take it too seriously. If the sky falls, there will always be someone hired to support it. What is there to be afraid of with such a big man as the CIA? There are also Charles and Eric, two hackers, guarding. Nothing is a problem. Rorschach returned to his dormitory in a good mood. After closing the door, he immediately entered his personal attribute panel impatiently. Host: Rorschach. Age: 16 years old. Speed: 53 meters per second. Strength: 7.2 tons. Physique: 124. Average value of healthy adult males, 10. Mental strength: 82. Average value of healthy adult males, 10. Current template: Homelander unlocked progress 1%. Abilities: Perspective elementary, Superhearing elementary, Flight unlocked, Heat ray unlocked. Origin points: 100 points. The relevant data on the panel also changed accordingly. The origin points are finally not 0. It is detected that the host has surplus origin points. Do you want to use them immediately for strengthening? The system also popped up such a prompt. This is of course needless to say. If you don't strengthen the origin points immediately, do you have to save them for the new year? It's just that how to strengthen them needs to be considered a little bit. After all, the use of origin points is still diverse. Rorschach began to study it carefully. He soon found that it was very uneconomical to use the origin points to add a single attribute, and its cost performance was not as good as the corresponding bonus brought by unlocking the overall template. In this case, there is no need to hesitate. Rorschach directly added the 100 origin points to the unlocking progress. Congratulations to the host, the Homelander template is unlocked by 2%. Only 1% of the unlocking progress. Rorschach was a little speechless. He was busy all the time, but the result was only 1%. Host: Rorschach. Age: 16 years old. Speed: 61 meters per second. Strength: 15.2 tons. Physique: 144. Average of healthy adult males 10. Mental strength: 102. Average of healthy adult males 10. Current template: Homelander unlocked progress 2%. Abilities: Perspective elementary, Superhearing elementary, Flight unlocked, Heat ray unlocked. Origin point: 0 points. However, when Rorschach saw the data on the panel again, he couldn't help but get excited. All the attributes of his body have changed a lot now. The speed has reached 61 meters, and the strength has reached 15 tons. The data alone may not be intuitive enough. If you look at a few examples, it will be more vivid. The first is Rorschach's speed, which has reached twice the maximum speed allowed by the highway. This means that Rorschach can now easily catch up with most cars with his legs. The plane that Captain America grabbed on the roof of the anti-terrorist building in Captain America 3 was an Air France's 350 attack helicopter, weighing 2.5 tons, which made Captain America grimaced with exhaustion. But in Rorschach's case, he could easily grab 6 with one hand. In addition to those parameters that can be quantified, the corresponding abilities on the Rorschach panel that have not been quantified have also been enhanced. For example, clairvoyance and super hearing in the ability column. His previous clairvoyance could only see through a range of 10 meters, nothing more, but now, he could easily see through everything within 50 meters. As for hearing, now as long as Rorschach is willing, the conversation between Charles and the others in the office can be heard clearly, and it is no different from the scene. We must keep this matter in our stomachs and pretend that nothing has happened. No matter what William Stryker led that team of mutants to do, it has nothing to do with us, and we never knew about it. What about Bradley? Erase his relevant memories, and then we send him away as if he has never been here. What if Stryker continues to send people to hunt him down? If Stryker really did it, then he must have a reason for doing it. Charles, let's not meddle in other people's business. The best we can do is send Bradley to a safe place where he can live a good life, but we can't do more than that. Charles, Eric, and Maura had a heated discussion in the office. After wasting countless words, the three people finally reached an agreement. Erase the memory of Bradley meeting Eric and being sent here, and then secretly send this person to a safe place. Not only that, because the matter also involved a CIA executive, the three decided to end the matter and it became a secret among several people. Don't report it, don't spread it. At least, that's until we know whether Jason Stryker is actually involved. The only thing everyone can do now is to use as much power as possible to secretly erase the relevant traces before Stryker can react. Don't let Stryker get to their heads. Ohio. Playground. The once bustling amusement park has now been completely cordoned off, with cordons on all entrances and exits and police officers guarding it. Boom. The sound of propellers sounded, and an armed helicopter slowly descended from the sky and landed on the open space of the playground. A young man wearing sunglasses just stepped off the helicopter. Surprisingly, it was William Stryker. A young man who had been at the scene early and carried 2 long swords on his back greeted him. Sir, did the plane run out of fuel halfway? So you went to refuel halfway. You were half an hour late than the agreed time, even if you are a commander. Shut up, Wade. I swear, if I have the chance, I will sew your mouth shut. Stryker interrupted Wade helplessly and asked about the business. The scene was not destroyed, was it? No, this is just an inconspicuous town. They don't dare to neglect orders from the military. The sheriff sent almost half of his men here. Did you gain anything? Last night, 2 out-of-town visitors came to the playground looking for Bradley. Witnesses saw their fight, but it was dark at the time, so the witnesses did not see clearly. God, sir, you should really see Victor's body. His head was chopped off, poor Victor. Wade subconsciously rambled again, until Stryker looked over and closed his mouth angrily. As one of the mutant agents under Stryker, Wade is still very strong. He can defeat an entire army by himself by dancing with 2 swords. The key is to be very obedient. It's not as difficult to control as Victor. There's just one thing, it's too chatty, and it doesn't matter the occasion. Are there any others? Those 2 out-of-towners once asked some people about Bradley's whereabouts. They came here for Bradley. Stryker couldn't help but frown. Bradley was so weak, why would anyone target him? He suddenly had a feeling that things might not be that simple. Sir, leave this matter to me to investigate. I know you want to find out the guy who killed Victor. In fact, I also want to see whether the opponent's sword is faster or mine. No, Wade, Victor is dead, and you will do his job. I will leave the things here to others. Stryker interrupted Wade directly. Get the serum we need. It's okay to leave the ghost to me, but what about Logan? I remember you had other plans for him. You don't have to worry about Logan. Besides Ghost, there is another guy. I believe you will like his ability very much. Stryker handed over a piece of information casually. Wade glanced at it and his eyes suddenly lit up. Wow, that's so cool. This guy can actually emit lasers from his eyes. I like it. Okay, go ahead and do what you should do. I'll go talk to the witnesses. CIA base. On the tree-shaded path. Rorschach and Charles were taking a leisurely walk. Of course, this only looked like this to outsiders. Rorschach, I have erased Bradley's related memories. Mora will arrange for someone to send him away secretly tonight. This matter is of great importance. We insiders cannot leak any information or tell anyone about this matter. Do you have any questions? Even when talking about such serious matters, Charles used a conversational tone. I understand, Charles. Rorschach nodded without changing his expression. Good. Charles was very satisfied with Rorschach's understanding, and he told Rorschach another thing, also, let's stop recruiting mutants for a while. Someone saw you and Eric in that amusement park. Stryker might find something, but you don't have to worry. We have erased other traces as much as possible. As long as you stay here honestly, there won't be any trouble. Okay Rorschach, I'm leaving. Mora is still waiting for me. Anyway, relax, everything will be fine. The two stood still at the intersection. Charles waved to Rorschach, and then joined Mora and Eric who were waiting there. Luo Shaw waved to the two of them from a distance as a greeting, and then watched them leave. Are you hiding from Stryker? Actually, I'm not afraid of him. Rorschach shrugged. Being holed up in the CIA was actually not in line with Rorschach's plan, because he really wanted to see if going out for a walk would stimulate missions like being in an amusement park. However, after a slight hesitation, Rorschach gave up the idea. If he did this, it would bring a lot of trouble to Charles and the others. Rorschach is not such a troublemaker. Moreover, Rorschach's physical attributes have just been greatly improved, so he just needs this time to get used to it. In addition, if the memory is correct, something big is about to happen in this base. Instead of going out looking for opportunities, it is better to wait for opportunities to come to your door. Chapter 11. Bang Bang Bang. A secret training room in the base. His upper body is naked, and his muscles are as clear-cut as steel and full of strength. Any girl who sees him can't help but take a second look. Rorschach was punching a metal sandbag hanging in front of him. That's right, sandbags made of metal. There is no way. Rorschach's current strength is too strong, and some ordinary training methods are completely inapplicable. That's why Charles made this metal sandbag specifically for Rorschach. Rorschach's current physique is more than 14 times that of ordinary people. Although he is not completely bulletproof, the bullet can only break through Rorschach's skin and eventually get stuck in his flesh. At this level of intensity, coupled with some boxing bandages, there will be no problem hitting the metal sandbags. More than a week has passed since the incident at the Springfield City playground. During this time, everything has been calm and there has been no trouble. I don't know if Stryker hasn't found anything, is holding back some big move, or is too busy with other things to take care of it. Rorschach didn't care about this. With his current strength, unless Stryker comes with an army, it won't be enough for Rorschach. Compared to Stryker, Rorschach is still more concerned about his own strength. Yes, after these few days of training, I have completely adapted to the current strength and speed. Luo Shaw thought with great satisfaction in his heart while pumping his fist. At this time, Rorschach suddenly stopped and began to wipe the sweat slowly, then went to pick up his clothes from the hanger. Because Rorschach heard footsteps, and through the strength and frequency of the pace, he could tell immediately that the person coming was Ruiwen. Everyone's footsteps are unique and highly identifiable, something Rorschach had never noticed before he had super hearing. Squeak. Sure enough, the door was opened not long after, and Raven's figure appeared in front of Luo Shaw. The cake seller. Rorschach had just picked up the vest, and before he had a chance to put it on, Raven saw it, and Raven screamed out in an exaggerated manner. Luo Shaw, your figure is too good. No girl can resist such temptation. Ruiwen's eyes widened. That's enough, my eyeballs are about to pop out. Rorschach put on the vest ruthlessly, not giving Raven a chance. Is this your fitness secret, hitting a metal sandbag? Raven glanced at the bumpy metal sandbag on one side again. He couldn't help but grin. What a monster. A monster even among mutants. No, my secret is actually to drink more boiled water. Luo Shaw said seriously. Ruiwen, what the hell, does anyone boil water before drinking it? Forget it, Rorschach, do you know that the party has already started and everyone is waiting for you? At this time, Raven remembered that she had something else to do and shouted to Rorschach. Sorry, I forgot. Luo Sha said honestly. He was immersed in training for a while, unaware of the passage of time. I knew it was like this. Go take a shower and come down quickly. Don't keep us waiting too long. Okay, I'll be there right away. After returning to his dormitory, Rorschach took a quick shower and changed into clean clothes, then went to a leisure bar on the first floor. But I saw Raven, Hank, Alex, Sean, Amon and other mutants there. They were all chatting and kicking, and bursts of laughter could be heard from time to time. That's a lot of fun. Luo Sha opened the door and walked in, saying something to everyone. I'm sorry, everyone, I'm late. Rorschach, you came just in time. We just talked about how we should have a cool nickname. My name is Mystique and Amon's name is Darwin. Mystique is officially launched, Raven said to Rorschach enthusiastically. Mystique, what a great nickname. Amon, is your Darwin the Darwin of evolution? Rorschach naturally found a seat to sit down and joined the discussion. That's right, because my ability is to adapt. Darwin simply introduced Rorschach. Rorschach, just now Darwin put his head into the fish tank and gills actually grew. This is crazy, Alex introduced to Rorschach with a flourish. What do you think about my name being Siren? If it were me, I would be called Angel, which was also my stage name. The Destroyer. This nickname is more in line with my temperament. The future Sirens, Devastators, and Angels are all online. What about you, Rorschach? The Angel fluttered the wings on his back, suspended in the air, looked at Rorschach and asked. My words, Luo Sha thought softly, and then spit out 3 words from his mouth, people of the motherland. People from the motherland. All the people were a little confused. What the hell are the people of the motherland doing? Everyone was completely confused. Rorschach, what do the people of the motherland say? Why are you called this name? Mystique Raven couldn't help but ask curiously. Don't you understand? That's right. This kind of nickname that others don't understand is more powerful. Luo Sha laughed. No one paid much attention to the name of the motherland. A group of people began to have fun and released their abilities to the fullest. Enjoying this mutant party. Buzz. The siren opened his mouth and a sound wave shattered the glass. Chi chi chi. Alex the Destroyer fired several energy rings and cut off all the statues outside. However, Rorschach did not join in. He just sat on the sofa alone. According to the plot, Black Emperor Shao and the others are probably coming soon, right? What are you doing? When everyone was having fun, an angry roar suddenly exploded. It was Agent Mora and Charles Eric who suddenly appeared. Mora was completely angry when she saw the mess at the scene and the immature behavior of the mutants. Not only her, but also Charles Eric, who also looked disappointed. Just now, they had just finished a meeting. The CIA finally found clues about Black Emperor Shah, and several people decided to formally let those mutants intervene. There is no doubt that Mora and others' proposal was questioned by the upper level. But Mora and others assured the upper level that they recruited not ordinary young people, but outstanding talents. The result, that's it. The face was slapped. Except for Rorschach, they were all very disappointing. Who broke the statue? Agent Mora stared at several mutants and asked. Alex. No, it's the Destroyer, that's his new name. Mystique Raven was still on top, pointing at Charles and Eric and continued, we are still thinking, you should be called Professor X, and you should be called Magneto. Professor X and Magneto are online. It's really good. Eric said with an ironic tone with unconcealable disappointment on his face. I have a deeper hope for you. Charles also couldn't help but shook his head repeatedly, but then his eyes fell on Rorschach and added, excluding you, Rorschach, you have always done a good job. Mystique, Devastator, and Siren couldn't help but glance at Rorschach sitting aside, subconsciously showing a hint of shame. They seemed to have gone a bit too far. The Angel couldn't help but curled his lips. Although he didn't say much, he was a little unconvinced in his heart. Who do you think you are? Are you here to teach me a lesson? Who invited me here in such a nice manner in the first place? Rorschach, could you please come over here? We have something to tell you. Mora waved to Rorschach at this time. Rorschach vaguely guessed Mora's purpose, but he didn't say much. Calmly following Mora, Charles and Eric, they walked to the lawn a little further away. Rorschach, we have got some clues about Shao. The plane will take off in an hour, heading to the Soviet Union. We are considering that maybe you can join us. Eric said to Rorschach seriously, asking for Rorschach's opinion. What do you think? Eric was completely convinced by Rorschach during the last playground action. Rorschach did not give a definite answer, because he knew that this time Eric and the others missed the target. There is no Xiao in the Soviet Union, there is only Xiao's confidant, the White Queen. And it is precisely this base that will welcome Xiao in the near future. Rorschach soon had a hard time deciding how to decide. Eric, thank you for your trust, but I'm very sorry. I don't know why, but there seems to be some problem with my body. Rorschach thought for a while and began to use a method he had used in his previous life, calling in sick. Rorschach, what's going on? Are you okay? Charles suddenly looked concerned on the side. I'm fine, Charles, it's just that my eyes hurt suddenly from time to time, as if something is about to erupt. Rorschach said to Charles, this can also be regarded as a way to pave the way for unlocking the ability of heat rays in the future. Have you gone to the infirmary to check your body? Mora also asked. I plan to ask about Hank later. Rorschach said to Mora. The beast Hank is nicknamed Bigfoot by everyone. His ability has no other function except running fast. He seems to be useless. But only Rorschach knows what a treasure beast Hank is. This guy is a top scientist. The Blackbird fighter jet, the brainwave enhancer, the future drug to cure Professor X's paralysis, etc., were all invented by Hank. This is remarkable. Okay, if that doesn't work, go to the infirmary. Charles nodded aside, but in this case, Rorschach, just stay at the base with everyone. When I come back, I will take a closer look at what's going on with your body. Then I'll wait for you to come back. Okay, let's go back, we're leaving. Take care of yourself. After waving his hand, Rorschach separated from the others. However, Luo Sha did not go back immediately. He thought for a while and went to other places first. Since Xiao was coming soon, he naturally had to make preparations. And when Rorschach turned back again, the mutants who were so excited before were all sitting upright, and the siren even straightened a chair that had been overturned in front of him. This situation, they look like helpless children who have made their parents angry. Well, Charles and the others made the atmosphere a little too awkward. After a while, Mystique Raven coughed dryly, trying to ease the awkwardness of the scene. What right does he have to say that about us? Who does he think they are, our parents? Angel snorted in displeasure. But we did break a lot of things. Siren said weakly. Political F stuff. Alex the Destroyer was finishing his blows at the side. What about our party? Siren looked at everyone again and spoke in a low voice. Party? Man, what are you thinking? The party is over. Hank shook his head speechlessly and began to take the lead in cleaning up the messy room. The others followed suit and began to join Hank's camp without saying any nonsense. As for Charles and the others calling Rorschach away alone, no one asked any more. Because this kind of thing has happened more than once, everyone is used to it. Everyone knows that Eric and Charles value Rorschach very much. In the past, we played without caring about the consequences, but now everyone has begun to enjoy the bitter consequences of being willful. A group of people worked for a while before finally clearing up the mess at the scene. After this incident, people like Mystique Raven, Beast Hank, Siren and others began to reflect on themselves. They sat around on the sofa and discussed that maybe they should make some changes in the future. Devastator and Darwin were playing games on the side, actually just using this to hide their annoyance. And at this same moment, in an office at the base, still unable to determine Xiao's exact trace. No, this is exactly what Mora and the others want to confirm. Two CIA agents were discussing matters. But suddenly, some strange sound sounded. A fat CIA executive couldn't help but stand up and walked to the window to check the situation. But just when he turned around, a red-skinned guy appeared behind him suddenly like a ghost. Caught another Secret Service agent. The next second it disappeared again. When the CIA executives turned around, they were stunned. Where were the people? Aha! Before the CIA executive could react, he felt his eyes dazzled when a red-skinned weirdo suddenly appeared and grabbed the executive. The next moment, the executive found himself several hundred meters above the ground. The red-skinned weirdo let go. The executive plummeted straight down. Boom! It hit the ground hard. Boom, boom, boom. A faint dull sound continued to sound. All the mutants felt something was wrong, got up one after another, and walked to the window to check the situation. Only Rorschach looked calm. He knew that the Black Emperor was coming. The current movement is that the Red Devil is massacring the CIA agents. Boom. At this time, a CIA agent fell from the sky and smashed directly into the yard outside, leaving him bloody in front of all the mutants. All the mutants were scared to death. Even though they have some special abilities, they are still young people who have never seen much of the world. How can we remain calm in the face of such a tragic situation? Bang bang bang. Then, corpses continued to fall from the sky and hit various places in the base, causing everyone to panic. What happened? The siren held the windowsill tightly with both hands, as if this was the only way to make him feel safe. What happened? The destroyer Alex swallowed hard. It's mutants, other mutants. Hank, who was more mature than the others, made such a judgment. In this situation, unless it was a mutant, ordinary people would not be able to do it. Rorschach, how can you be so calm? How did you do it? Mystique Raven looked at Rorschach in surprise. The base was massacred. How could Rorschach not be afraid at all? It's very simple. Rorschach smiled coquettishly at Mystique. I was pretending. Mystique. The Sirens people were all in awe. At this time, he still had the mind to joke. Rorschach's psychological quality is really not covered. They are about to pee, okay. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of gunfire began to be heard faintly, and the CIA agents began to engage in fierce exchanges of fire with the invaders. Back off, back off, back into the room. We are under attack. A team of agents rushed out in time, each holding an assault rifle in their hands, and shouted at Riven and others. Don't look at how they usually sneer at these mutants, like watching monkeys in a zoo. But at this critical moment, they still fulfilled their duties and began to protect these mutants. Even if they were facing a death crisis. New mission generated. The mission is as follows. Prevent Black Emperor and his party from taking away any mutants. Task reward. 300 origin points. At this time, the corresponding prompt sound began to appear in Rorschach's mind. The new mission was triggered again. Rorschach couldn't help but feel excited. This mission is only 300 origin points. But then, Rorschach couldn't help but silently complain. He felt that the system was pitting him. Last time, I had to deal with a mere saber-toothed tiger for 100 origin points. As a result, now, there are 3 powerful mutants, Black Emperor Shao, Red Devil, and Torrent. Each one is stronger than the saber-toothed tiger. This mission is more than 3 times more difficult. 300 origin points are a bit too little anyway, right? But on second thought, it seems that the account cannot be calculated in this way. After all, the task issued by the system this time is to let Rorschach stop Black Emperor from taking away mutants, not to let Rorschach kill Black Emperor and his men. According to the plot, Rorschach also knows that although Black Emperor has gone to great lengths to invade this secret base this time, he only took away Angel in the end, that's all. In other words, this mission can actually be summarized as, stop Black Emperor from taking Angel away. And there are actually many ways to achieve this goal, for example, knock Angel unconscious now. But Rorschach will not do this for no reason. He doesn't even care about the 3 people of Black Emperor. Now Rorschach has this strength. Even if it was the Black Emperor, Luo Sha thought that he could not kill him, but it was impossible for him to kill him. 300 origin points, just 300 origin points, the system father has the final say. Swish. Just when those thoughts flashed through Luo Sha's mind, the Red Devil really appeared outside the door of the leisure bar like a ghost. He also made a very pretentious action, just like Rose opened her arms in Jack's arms. Behind you. Be careful behind you. The mutants in the room yelled at the CIA agents at the top of their voices. The agents turned around, picked up the assault rifles in their hands and pulled the trigger ruthlessly at the Red Devil. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. The dense bullets covered the Red Devil like raindrops. Swish. But the Red Devil disappeared in an instant. In the blink of an eye, he appeared beside one of the special agents, grabbed the assault rifle in the other's hand, and shot at another special agent. The other special agents were shocked, but before they could come to their senses, the Red Devil disappeared from their sight again. He appeared in another place like a ghost. Whoosh. On the other side, a terrible tornado suddenly appeared out of thin air and swept towards the big ball in the courtyard. The big ball was destroyed in an instant. That was the brainwave enhancer that Beast Hank made specifically for Charles, and it was also the only thing that Black Emperor was afraid of. So Black Emperor came here not only to take away some mutants, but also to destroy the brainwave enhancer. Whoosh! After the tornado destroyed the brainwave enhancer as a whole, it seemed to have eyes and continued to sweep towards everyone. Finally stopped in front of another window. A middle-aged man with long hair and a suit appeared in front of everyone. It was the Torrent. In front of them was the Red Devil, who was ruthlessly slaughtering the CIA's special agents, and in the back were the terrifying mutants who could create hurricanes, blocking their retreat. Mystique, Siren, Ravager and other mutants were almost in despair. Rorschach, what should we do? Siren couldn't help but look at Rorschach with anxious eyes. Yes, Rorschach, think of a way. The Ravager also followed closely and asked. At this critical juncture, Rorschach, who was highly valued by Charles and Eric, subconsciously became the backbone of everyone. Stay here for now, nothing will happen, Rorschach said to several companions very calmly. But, those people outside can't hold on for long, we'd better get out of here quickly. Darwin had a different opinion on this. That red-skinned guy can transform. Is there any point in leaving here? Just one sentence from Rorschach immediately left Darwin speechless. Stay still. After saying these words, Rorschach didn't waste any time and rushed towards the Red Devil at a speed several times faster than the car. Those CIA agents were protecting them no matter what. If they were fully capable, Rorschach would not watch these people being killed in vain. Laugh. In the square outside, the Red Devil stabbed a special agent in the chest. Just when he was about to kill another special agent with one blow, a sudden strong wind blew in his face. A young mutant appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. He punched the Red Devil hard. Aha! The Red Devil used his power and the person suddenly disappeared. There is no doubt that Rorschach's fist hit nothing. What's the point of dealing with those ordinary people? If you have the ability, come to me. Rorschach looked around, looking for the Red Devil, and shouted. This is not because Rorschach is showing off, but because he is deliberately tempting the Red Devil to attack him. Considering the Red Devil's abilities, any attack from Rorschach would not be effective against the Red Devil. Twice the speed of the highway is not enough. The only chance is for the Red Devil to take the initiative to attack Rorschach. Go back, it's dangerous here. Go back quickly, they are targeting you. ... Seeing Rorschach come out on his own initiative, several CIA agents couldn't help but turn their heads and yell at Rorschach. Of course, some agents were already scared to death by the Red Devil and the Torrent, and they just bit their lips tightly and trembled all over to be on guard, so how could they care about Rorschach? Excuse me, can I borrow your gun? Rorschach ignored the agents at all, but stretched out his hand and snatched the assault rifle from a special agent next to him. He took 2 steps forward and came to the statue that had been cut in half by the ravaged one, jumped up lightly, and stood directly on it. He held the assault rifle tightly in his hand and began to watch and listen. Whoosh! A red light flashed in the crowd, and at the same time, the figure of the Red Devil suddenly appeared. The other agents naturally couldn't react, but Rorschach reacted immediately. Bang! Rorschach turned around suddenly, aimed at the Red Devil and shot directly. Whoosh! The Red Devil, who had just appeared, disappeared again. There was no way. Rorschach's reaction was too fast, and the Red Devil had almost no time to do anything, and a bullet flew over. He had to dodge. Whoosh! Bang! Whoosh! Bang! In this way, the Red Devil and Rorschach started a game of hide and seek. As long as the Red Devil appeared, a bullet would be sure to follow immediately, forcing the Red Devil to use his ability to divert. Provoked by Rorschach to such an extent, the Red Devil's attention was really attracted. He no longer continued to attack the other CIA agents, but used his own ability to appear around Rorschach. Constantly approaching Rorschach. Interesting. The Rapids on the side saw this scene and couldn't help but hug their arms and watch the excitement. He didn't mean to step forward to help. They are all mutant veterans who have fought with Black Emperor and experienced countless storms. How could they besiege a junior? Moreover, Jiliu knows the ability of Red Devil very well. Although Red Devil is temporarily suppressed by the young man, it is just that. The young man does not pose any threat to Red Devil. I believe that it will not take long for Red Devil to find the right opportunity and take the initiative. Ah, I can't believe that there is such a potential mutant hidden here. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded. A man wearing a helmet and looking quite majestic walked over with brisk steps. It was Black Emperor Shao, who had already solved the garrison forces in other places in the CIA and came here in a swagger. Clang clang clang. Seeing Shao appear, the surviving special agents at the scene immediately raised their rifles and aimed at Shao. Shao did not do much, and did not even look at the special agents. Those people were all low-level ants in his eyes, nothing more. Jiliu on the side stopped watching the fun at this time. He shook his hands and a tornado was hit out, sweeping towards the special agents. A scream and a groan suddenly sounded. Everyone was blown away by the tornado. When the tornado completely dissipated, there was no CIA agent left standing at the scene. The only comforting thing was that compared to the deadly swords of the Red Devil, most of them who were blown to the ground by the tornado were lucky enough to save their lives. It just looked more embarrassed. Rorschach, who was high on the side, just glanced at Shao lightly and did not do much to Shao, because he knew that any attack on Shao was to transfer energy to Shao. All was in vain. Shao, actually, I'm about to get it done. The figure of the Red Devil suddenly appeared in a place, and he immediately explained to the Black Emperor. Black Emperor sent him and Riptide to clear the way for the meeting between Black Emperor and other mutants. As a result, Black Emperor came, but Red Devil was still dragging his feet and hadn't finished his work. Strictly speaking, he was actually derelict in his duty. Don't worry, Black Emperor said with a smile, looking like he was just watching the fun. I also want to know more about my compatriots here. But even if Black Emperor said so, how could Red Devil dare to delay? He activated his ability, and began to flash quickly around Rorschach, disappearing and appearing more and more frequently. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of the gun in Rorschach's hand became more and more frequent, but gradually, as Red Devil's flashing speed increased, Rorschach obviously couldn't keep up with the opponent's rhythm. He was a little flustered. To make matters worse, Rorschach had run out of bullets, and he couldn't help but start checking his gun. Now, Red Devil seized this critical moment and appeared directly behind Rorschach. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Rorschach. Once Rorschach was caught, he would be completely defeated, because the Red Devil could instantly take him to a height of thousands of feet. The human rain in the base before was caused by the Red Devil. Be careful, a burst of exclamations suddenly sounded. Mystique Raven, Beast Hank, Siren and others all couldn't help but exclaimed. Swish. But at this moment, Rorschach suddenly stretched his hand back, as if he had eyes on his back, and suddenly grabbed the Red Devil's neck. Before the Red Devil's hand grabbed him, he first controlled the opponent. Snap. Then Rorschach didn't say anything nonsense, and suddenly he broke the Red Devil's neck with his right hand. The Red Devil's eyes widened, and he couldn't believe the scene in front of him anyway. This young man is so powerful. How did he do it? What the Red Devil naturally couldn't have thought of was that Rorschach could hear his heartbeat very clearly. When facing the Red Devil's shape-shifting, this is a faster and more accurate way than visual lock. Every time the Red Devil changes his position, Rorschach can lock onto the Red Devil's position about 0.5 seconds faster than the average person. That's why Rorschach can attack the Red Devil instantly and kill him with one strike the first moment the Red Devil appears close to him. This is also why Rorschach actively invites the Red Devil to attack him, because he can only be sure of success if he gets close to him. If he were to attack from a distance, after locking onto the Red Devil, he would have to twist his body, use his arms, aim, and pull the trigger, which would be much slower. He would miss the chance to kill the Red Devil. Although he had a lot of questions in his mind, Red Devil was destined not to get the answer. His eyes went dark and he completely lost consciousness. Plop. Rorschach then threw his hand and threw Red Devil's body to the ground like throwing a dead dog. Rorschach actually killed that scary guy. No way. Is it fake? Mystique Raven, Beast Hank, Darwin and other mutants who were worried about Rorschach before were all dumbfounded. Rorschach was facing the desperate crisis of flying in the previous second, but he turned the tide in the next second and killed the opponent in an instant. This turn of events was so huge that everyone was a little unresponsive. Azasai Demon. Black Emperor was stunned for a moment, and just then he couldn't help but let out a low cry of surprise and pain. Surprised, because Black Emperor never thought that such a powerful mutant like Red Devil could complete so many difficult tasks with ease, but died on such a simple task. Died at the hands of such a young man. The pain was natural because Red Devil was Black Emperor's rare right-hand man and loyal minister. It would be hard to find another one if he died. But then, Black Emperor looked at Rorschach's eyes and began to flash with eager light. This young man was the mutant with the greatest potential he had ever met. He must be included in his own command. In this way, even if he lost Red Devil, it would not be a big deal. Poor Red Devil, if he knew that his master had just died and he had forgotten him in an instant, I don't know how he would feel. But this is Black Emperor. A cold-blooded executioner who would do anything to achieve his goal. You killed Azazel. The eyes of the Rapids also widened, with deep shock in them. He flipped his hand, and a cyclone appeared in his palm. Whoosh! But before the Rapids could shoot the cyclone out, Rorschach shook his hand and shot at the Rapids. A dagger flew out of his hand and turned into a cold light. Where did the dagger come from? It was naturally prepared by Rorschach when Charles Eric and the others left and disappeared. Under the effect of Rorschach's force of more than 10 tons, the dagger suddenly turned into a stream of light and shot out towards Jiliu. If a horizontal force of more than 10 tons acts on an object and the object starts to accelerate from zero, how long does it take to slide 20 meters horizontally? It was just a blink of an eye. Swish! Jiliu only felt a flash in front of his eyes, and he didn't react at all. He trembled violently and flew backwards. He fell heavily to the ground with a bang. And on Jiliu's chest, Rorschach's dagger hit him right in the chest, piercing Jiliu's entire right chest. You. Jiliu only had time to make these two vague sounds from his mouth, and then his head tilted and he was completely motionless. The scene was so quiet for a while. Everyone just stared at the body of the stream on the ground, feeling that it was a little unreal. This mutant could easily create a tornado, and even such a huge fortification as the brainwave enhancer could be easily destroyed. A group of special agents could not make any waves in front of him. The other party waved their hands and solved them all in the blink of an eye. For everyone, although the Red Devil is terrible, the destructive power of the stream is even greater. As a result, such a powerful mutant died so easily. But this is not something strange for Rorschach. Many mutants are like this, with high attack and low defense. The most typical one is Magneto. Magneto's ability is unquestionable. In Days of Future Past, he overturned the entire football field in anger. How domineering is he? He is much stronger than the current stream. In the end, he was knocked down by a small bullet from Raven. Professor X is actually the same. If he wears the helmet that can block his abilities, anyone with a gun or even a knife can kill Professor X. Of course, this is Professor X before he sat in a wheelchair. So for Rorschach, although Riptide is powerful, it actually has a very fatal weakness. The opponent's ability cannot be released instantly, or it cannot hit him instantly. After all, it takes time for a tornado to move. And Riptide itself is not good at fighting. In this case, why does Rorschach want to compete with the opponent? Is he crazy? The best way is to kill him in time. Rorschach is worthy of it. So cool. After being shocked, the mutants began to get excited again. 2 of the original 3 mutants were killed by Rorschach in the blink of an eye. The crisis has been greatly resolved. With Rorschach around, people really feel inexplicably relieved. Everyone looked at Rorschach with admiration, and they admired Rorschach to the extreme. At the critical moment of danger, look at their performance and then look at Rorschach's performance. The difference is too great. Clap, clap, clap. The applause rang out, and the Black Emperor actually looked at Rorschach with approval and clapped his hands. It was as if the ones who died were not his 2 confidants, but 2 insignificant passers-by. It's amazing. The admiration on the Black Emperor's face was not concealed in any way. He strode directly towards the crowd, but his eyes were still on Luo Xia. Do you know what the 2 of them can do? Do you know how capable they are? But they were all ended by you. I have to say, this is something I didn't expect at all. You didn't even blink. Talents like you shouldn't be buried in a place like this. Come with me. A new era is coming, and that will be our era. The Black Emperor extended an invitation to Rorschach from the bottom of his heart. You were right, a new era will indeed come. Rorschach nodded. The corners of the Black Emperor's lips couldn't help but evoke a smile, a very satisfied smile. He became more and more satisfied with Luo Sha. He was really a teachable child. But I am very sure that the new era we are talking about is not the same thing. But then, Rorschach shook his head and said with a serious face, and the founder of the new era will not be you. Not me. Then who could it be? The Black Emperor raised his eyebrows and sneered, you wouldn't tell me, would it be you? For Rorschach, having the template of being a native of the motherland, and also knowing the direction of some major events, if there is really anyone in the world who can usher in a new era, he really has the greatest possibility. However, Rorschach was too lazy to argue with the Black Emperor about this kind of thing. He was a time traveler, so he naturally knew how stupid it was to argue blindly in front of the villain. Swish! Another cold light flashed by. It was Luo Sha who shook his hand at the Black Emperor again, and another dagger drew a sharp knife light in the air. In the blink of an eye, it shot at the Black Emperor. But the situation that killed the rapids did not happen. When the dagger touched the Black Emperor, it seemed to encounter some unknown energy blocking, and it stopped directly in front of the Black Emperor. Then it fell to the ground with a thud. It did not cause any effect on the Black Emperor at all. What's going on? Why can't the dagger penetrate? All the mutants were confused. Since the dagger can't penetrate, then the bullet is useless, right? Only Luo Sha knew the principle. Of course, the Black Emperor absorbed all the kinetic energy of the dagger in the first place, which made the speed of the dagger drop to 0 at once. Naturally, it could not continue to penetrate. It could only fall to the ground. It's worthy of being the Black Emperor. Luo Sha couldn't help but secretly admire it. It has to be said that this ability of the Black Emperor is still very buggy. It is simply a cheat, because it means that all forms of attack are ineffective against the Black Emperor. Whether it is physical attack or energy attack, it's useless. Don't do any more useless work. The Black Emperor was not annoyed, but stood there with his arms folded, looking at Luo Sha with a smile. Luo Sha's attack just now was just a tickle to him. Luo Sha seemed not to hear what the Black Emperor said, and ignored it, but ran to the side, raised a car with both hands, and rushed towards the Black Emperor. More than a ton of force pressed on Luo Sha, which made Luo Sha's ground shake faintly with every step he took. The roaring momentum was so terrifying. What was even more shocking was that Luo Sha was holding such a huge thing, but it seemed that he was not affected at all. The speed did not seem to be reduced at all. It seemed that the car was made of paper. This scene is still very visually impactful. Isn't Rorschach too exaggerated? What a monster. Mystique, Raven and others swallowed their saliva. Wow, what a terrible power. Even Black Emperor couldn't help showing admiration on his face. The more he looked at Rorschach, the more satisfied he was. However, Black Emperor didn't care about Rorschach's attack at all. He just stood there and waited for Rorschach's arrival. Although it was enough to show off, it must be said that Black Emperor had the capital to show off. Boom boom boom. Soon, in such a tremor, Rorschach had run in front of Black Emperor, jumped up and jumped high. He grabbed the tail of the car with both hands and smashed it on Black Emperor's head. The car weighing more than 1 ton, plus the inertia of falling from the sky, and Rorschach's power, just merged together, like a small mountain, smashing down on Black Emperor's head. But Black Emperor raised his right hand casually and lifted it up gently. The car just froze above Black Emperor's head, just like a leaf, being lifted up gently by Black Emperor's hand. It was unknown whether Black Emperor had absorbed the gravitational potential energy, or whether Black Emperor absorbed the terrible kinetic energy and used his own strength to lift the car. In short, Rorschach's move was completely useless and completely useless. Boom! Black Emperor gently pushed forward with one hand, and the car was overturned by Black Emperor and fell heavily to the ground. Then Black Emperor gently patted the dust off his body, as if he had done something insignificant, and then looked at Rorschach. Okay, enough of the trouble. There should be a limit, right? The atmosphere at the scene began to become depressed again. No one expected that Black Emperor would be so powerful. Rorschach, who killed the Red Devil and the Rapids in succession, could not make any waves in front of Black Emperor. Rorschach, we're here to help you. The destroyer Alex stood up at this time, twisting his body like a hula hoop, and swishing out several energy halos. Two of the halos hit other places, but one of them hit the Black Emperor with incredible precision. The halos of the destroyer were still very powerful, and could even cut through metal sculptures instantly. It stands to reason that cutting through a person would be no problem at all. But the next moment, the smile on the destroyer's face froze, because he saw the Black Emperor suddenly reaching out to his halos and pressing hard into his palm. The halos were actually absorbed by the Black Emperor. Boom! The Black Emperor then raised his right foot and stepped on the ground, releasing the absorbed energy directly. Crack, crack, crack. The ground was directly broken, and a huge crack spread forward, directly rushing into the room. There was a loud bang. The wall shook violently, and then half of it collapsed. The mutants screamed and dodged in all directions, and when they looked at the Black Emperor, their eyes were filled with endless shock and fear. They realized that it was not something they could deal with. The two sides were not on the same level. No one dared to act rashly again. When Black Emperor saw this scene, he also showed a satisfied smile. He glanced at everyone and said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. But now, can we talk?" Everyone was trembling and crowded together, looking at Black Emperor with fearful eyes, and no one dared to answer. Black Emperor then turned his eyes back to Rorschach. "What about you?" Rorschach did not seem to continue to attack Black Emperor, but walked back to the crowd without saying a word. First, Rorschach had verified it himself that he really had no way to kill Black Emperor, so there was no need to do useless work. Second, other mutants also deeply realized the power of Black Emperor, so the time was ripe. "Rorschach, what should we do?" Mystique Raven whispered to Rorschach's opinion, and others also looked at Rorschach with inquiring eyes. Although Rorschach could not defeat Black Emperor, he was still the backbone of everyone's hearts. "Everyone, hold each other's hands," Rorschach reminded everyone inexplicably. Although everyone didn't quite understand what Luo Sha meant, it was not the time to ask more questions. They followed Luo Sha's instructions and grabbed each other. At this time, Luo Sha took out several gas bombs that he had prepared long ago, pulled the rings, and threw them all at He Huang. Chi chi chi. A large amount of irritating white smoke instantly spread. "Darwin, didn't you say you wanted to leave before? It's time." Luo Sha took the lead and led everyone to retreat quickly. Everyone realized that Luo Sha wanted everyone to hold on to each other because he was afraid that someone would be covered by the thick smoke and get lost. Cough cough cough. The sound of Black Emperor coughing suddenly came from the thick smoke. Even if he could absorb energy, it was a pity that it was not a range hood. There is no way to deal with those irritating gases. Of course, as a powerful mutant, the Black Emperor's physique is stronger than that of ordinary people. It is undoubtedly a fantasy to defeat the Black Emperor with just a few gas bombs. From the beginning, Rorschach prepared gas not to deal with the Black Emperor, but to delay the opponent, nothing more. Even if those gases don't fascinate the Black Emperor, they will always have an impact on his actions. While the Black Emperor was coughing, Luo Sha and the others had completely left the room. Everyone turned to look and found that the Black Emperor had not chased him out, and they couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Unfortunately, the pressure everyone felt in front of the Black Emperor was too great. "Rorschach, where did you get these things?" Darwin couldn't help but ask Rorschach. It's impossible for Rorschach to take these things with him when attending the party, right? "We'll talk about it after we get out." Rorschach hesitated, then took out a few gas bombs again, and placed a few at various exits outside the room. Ensure that the fog zone spreads to the maximum extent. Only in this way can the Black Emperor be delayed to the greatest extent. "Get out. Where are we going?" Angel asked, a little at a loss. "Leave first. This base has been exposed. We must leave immediately," Luo Sha couldn't help but say. "That's right, it's not safe here anymore." Hank agreed on the side and pointed in a direction. "Everyone, follow me. I have a purchasing car parked in parking lot C. We can fit in it even if we are crowded." "That's not necessary." Darwin shook his head, then walked directly to the cars parked on the roadside in front and took out his keychain. In addition to keys, there are other, metal pendants, that people don't usually pay attention to. But when he saw Darwin, he began to use those tools and began to unlock the Ford in front of him. Buzz. Bang. A sound wave from the Kraken had already shattered the window of another car. I'm sorry, are you okay yet? Boom. Bang. On the other side, Rorschach had already smashed a car window with one punch, and said to Darwin, "Stop dawdling, you know how to force start the car, right? Hurry up. Anyone else who has a trick, don't do it at this time." Hidden. It's a pity that the method shown in the movie of pulling out the wire and rubbing it a few times to start a fire seems simple, but it is really not something that ordinary people can master. No one except Darwin has this magical skill anymore. In the end, Darwin started the two cars one after another, and everyone got in and drove away frantically. Soon, the two cars were submerged in the night. After the two cars completely disappeared, the Black Emperor walked out of the large white fog, holding the wall with one hand and coughing loudly. It was simply, in tears. After the Black Emperor adjusted his condition, he turned around and saw that apart from the corpses scattered on the ground, there was no one else anywhere. All the mutants have long been gone. The Black Emperor's face began to become extremely gloomy. In this operation, he not only lost two of his capable men, but he was not able to take away even a single mutant, and he did not even begin to recruit those mutants. It's simply failure that opens the door to failure. It's a complete failure. The Black Emperor has never had such a setback. Rorschach, is that the name? A few seconds later, the Black Emperor murmured such words from his mouth. It can be said that his complete defeat this time was entirely due to that young mutant. Should you be fine now? How do I know? Anyway, don't stop and keep driving forward. There is a railroad ahead, and going further is a dead end. How do you know? Man, I used to drive a taxi. The other side, the mutants who had completely left the base and arrived at an unknown town were still a little shocked. They were all frightened in the base, and now that they think about it, they are even more frightened. They knew very well what kind of organization the CIA was, and as a result, everyone in the base was killed. Before that, except for Hank who served as a technical consultant in the base, everyone else was a child who was not very experienced in the world. What happened today will be their nightmare for a long time to come. Okay, everyone, calm down, calm down. Hank was older and more mature. He was the first to calm down and kept turning his head to look back. I have observed that there are no cars chasing us, so I think we should be fine. Call. Everyone in the car took a long breath after hearing this. By the way, who are those guys? Yeah, they seem to be coming for us. What are they looking for us for? I don't know, but I swear I never want to see that guy again in my life. After all, they were a group of young people. When the pressure on their hearts eased a little, they immediately started chattering. Everyone, we'll talk about this later. The problem now is that I think we should find a place to discuss countermeasures. Darwin, who was driving in front, raised his voice several octaves and turned his head to remind the people behind him. The mission is completed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 300 origin points. While everyone was making noise, Rorschach received this notification sound from the system. However, in front of everyone, he concealed his joy well and did not show anything. Instead, he quietly entered the system panel and checked the corresponding data. Host: Rorschach. Age: 16 years old. Speed: 61 meters per second. Power: 15.2 tons. Physique: 144. Average adult healthy male is 10. Mental strength: 102. Average adult healthy male, 10. Current template: Motherland unlock progress 2%. Ability: Clairvoyance elementary, Superhearing elementary, Flying unlocked, Heat ray unlocked. Origin point: 300 points. Sure enough, in the column of the origin point, the original 0 turned into 300. It is detected that the host has a balance of origin points. Do you want to use it immediately to strengthen it? Immediately afterwards, such a prompt popped up on the system panel again. What's there to hesitate about? Strengthen. Host: Rorschach. Age: 16 years old. Speed: 85 meters per second. Power: 39.2 tons. Physique: 204. Average adult healthy male is 10. Mental strength: 162. Average adult healthy male, 10. Current template: Motherland unlock progress 5%. Ability: Clairvoyance elementary, superhearing elementary, flying unlocked, heat ray unlocked. Origin point 0 point. At this same moment, the data on the system panel also changed accordingly. Luo Sha's various physical qualities have also been greatly improved compared to before. Feeling the surging power in his body, Rorschach really wanted to find a place to test how strong he was now. Considering that he was in the car now, he suppressed the impulse. The power is more than 20 tons. I remember the little spider in the Avengers universe, the power is also 20 tons, right? Rorschach couldn't help but think excitedly in his heart. When watching the movie, Rorschach was amazed by the powerful power of the little spider. He could hold a cruise ship with his bare hands and even pull a high-speed train with his bare hands. And now, Rorschach can do this kind of thing. As for the strength of his body, Rorschach can only estimate it secretly. Now it is estimated that if the bullet falls on him, it will only break some skin, right? Don't want more. I am afraid that as long as he completes one more mission, Rorschach estimates that even the bullet can't leave scars on himself. By that time, his body can be called a body of steel. The host unlocking progress has reached 5%, and the heat ray ability can be unlocked. Do you want to unlock it? What Rorschach didn't expect was that he thought the enhancement was over, but the system continued to send a prompt sound. Can the heat ray be unlocked? Rorschach was slightly startled, and he couldn't help but sit up subconsciously, because he was too excited. After so long since his rebirth, the ability of heat ray, which he had been thinking about for a long time, finally arrived. After all, what kind of motherland is a motherland without heat ray? Even from this skill alone, it is not only cool, but also very powerful and convenient, which is much stronger than super hearing, perspective and other abilities. If the heat ray was awakened earlier, it would be much easier for Rorschach to deal with the Red Devil in the rapids. Just a glance and it's done. At this time, a force of inertia acted on him, interrupting Rorschach's thoughts, and the car had slowly stopped on the side of the road. It turned out that everyone decided to meet together first to discuss what to do next. Bang, bang. The sound of car doors closing continued to ring, and the 7 mutants gathered together on the street. Everyone looked at each other in a state of embarrassment, and felt that the experience of this day was too bizarre and dreamy, so unreal. Being hunted by a mad killer, it was a wonderful day. The siren couldn't help shrugging and laughing at herself. That's right, and what's worse is that the mad killer may come to us again in the future. Darwin spread his hands. He killed all the agents in the base, I don't think they will give up easily. With Darwin's words, the faces of the people at the scene became more and more ugly. We must find out what's going on, Angel said with a serious face. Charles and the others must know what's going on. Haven't he and Eric been investigating a mutant? Maybe it's that madman. Everyone felt that Angel's words made sense. But Charles didn't tell them much about the relevant things, and everyone didn't know too much. Rorschach, what do you know? Angel then looked at Rorschach again. Others at the scene also looked over. If anyone is most likely to know more information, then it is undoubtedly Rorschach. Actually, I know very little. I only know that the man is called Shao, and he is the person that the CIA and Charles are looking for. In addition, he is very dangerous. Of course, I believe everyone has really felt this. But Rorschach did not say much, just told what Charles told him. He did not reveal what Charles did not say. It seems that everything can only wait for Charles and others to come back. Hank sighed on the side. After a simple discussion, everyone quickly reached a consensus. Find a place to settle down temporarily, hide from the limelight, and wait for the return of Charles and Eric. But where to go? Everyone at the scene is in trouble. Because everyone is poor. Although everyone has skills that others do not have, they are actually people at the bottom of society. There are taxi drivers, dancers, gangsters, and even one in prison. There are relatively few people like Hank who have a decent job. There is no money to pay the rent for 7 people. Well, Mystique Raven smiled at this time. She said to everyone mysteriously, if you want to stay out of the limelight for a while, I know a place. What is that place? Where I grew up. Half an hour later. Raven, are you kidding? Is this the house you mentioned? This is a castle. Raven, you grew up in a place like this. Oh my God. Are you a princess from a royal family? The mutants stood at the gate of Xavier Manor, looking at the luxurious and exaggerated building, and they were all shocked. It was hard for them to believe that such a place was actually a person's home. This is a house. Is it possible that their usual understanding of a house was wrong? Professor X is really rich. Even Rorschach, who knew Charles's background, couldn't help but marvel. Charles is indeed a super-rich second generation. That's right. The famous Charles Xavier is actually one of the few rich second generations in Marvel. The later Mutant Academy was actually rebuilt by Charles using his own home. Which of the Blackbird fighters, brainwave enhancers, and dangerous training rooms in Xavier's Genius Academy is not cutting-edge technology? It is impossible to make them without spending money. Not to mention that although Xavier's Genius Academy is nominally a school, it is more like a charity organization. After all, the students here do not have to pay tuition, and so many people have to pay for food, drink, and defecation. Professor X has been supporting him alone for years. Charles is really a rich man. You actually misunderstood. This is not my home, but Charles's home. Mystique Raven saw that everyone had misunderstood, so she began to explain to everyone, and stimulated everyone at the scene. They originally thought that Charles was just an ordinary rich man. After all, Charles's clothes and aristocratic temperament can't be faked, and his usual words and deeds can also be seen, but no one expected Charles to be so rich. After all the running all the way, and the excitement, in the CIA's secret base, a group of mutants can be said to be exhausted physically and mentally, hungry and tired. In addition, it is already midnight. So after a brief exclamation of Charles's wealth, Mystique Raven arranged rooms for everyone. Everyone went back to their rooms to make up, needless to say. Maybe they were too frightened, or maybe they were worried that the Black Emperor would come here again. Although everyone was exhausted, they still didn't sleep well at night. Not only was it difficult to fall asleep, but even after finally falling asleep, they would suddenly wake up several times. The slightest movement was enough to make people tense. They were nervous. This night was destined to be an uneasy night for everyone. The scenes of the Black Emperor leading people to massacre the CIA base really brought too much psychological shadow to everyone. Rorschach also didn't sleep, not because Rorschach was overly frightened like everyone else, on the contrary, he was excited. Because Rorschach couldn't wait to try what his heat rays felt like. It's this time, everyone must have fallen asleep, right? Rorschach thought to himself, and couldn't suppress the impulse in his heart, so he simply lifted the quilt and got out of bed. He planned to find a place in the yard to try it out. Anyway, the yard of Charles's house is big enough for Rorschach to perform, as long as he is careful not to hurt the flowers and plants. Squeak, ah. For fear of disturbing others, Rorschach opened the door quietly, even tiptoeing. As a result, just after he went out, a surprised voice rang out, "Rorschach." Rorschach turned his head and was also surprised, "Raven." But he saw that Mystique was wearing a nightgown, which was loose but still showed off her curvy figure. It is worth mentioning that Mystique at this time did not look like a normal human, but her original appearance with blue skin and special patterns on it. Obviously, Mystique took off her disguise when she was sleeping. And Mystique, like everyone else, couldn't sleep at all, so she planned to get up and get something to drink, but she didn't expect to meet Rorschach. Can't sleep. After a moment's pause, Raven naturally greeted Rorschach and walked straight towards him. Rorschach secretly regretted it and said that when he sneaked out in the future, he must use his super hearing to listen to the surrounding situation in advance. This way, he could avoid this embarrassing situation. Aren't you the same? Thinking so in his heart, Rorschach smiled at Raven calmly on the surface. Everyone is scared of what happened today. Raven walked closer and closer until she was face to face with Rorschach. Rorschach could clearly feel Raven's breath and smell the perfume on Raven's body. But, Rorschach, you didn't. Raven raised her head and looked at Rorschach with a slightly teasing look. Since no one can sleep, maybe we can go to your room and tell me why you are so brave. This woman, is she greedy for my body? Rorschach was speechless for a while. He knew that Western women were open-minded, but this was his first time to experience it. If it was an ordinary woman, he wouldn't mind what happened. But Mystique's current appearance, although not ugly, was beyond Rorschach's aesthetic. Raven, I'm not sleeping because I have something to do. Rorschach looked at Mystique seriously. Is it because of my appearance? Mystique thought Rorschach had rejected her and was a little frustrated. Then she had a thought, and a wave of waves surged on her body, and the appearance of her cousin appeared again. Will this be much better? It's exactly the same, right? Rorschach complained in his heart. This is the same as a blind date. If you have seen the real appearance of the blind date, what's the use of the other party's photoshopping to make it look good? Raven, look into my eyes. Rorschach suddenly said to Raven coldly. Raven thought Rorschach had something affectionate to say to her, otherwise why would he look into the other person's eyes? But the next second, she saw that Rorschach's eyes began to turn red. Rorschach. Raven was startled, and the little thoughts she had before disappeared, and her face was full of surprise. See, I seem to have awakened a power, so I plan to try it out. Rorschach explained to Raven seriously. Raven then realized that Rorschach's saying that he had something to do was not an excuse to perfunctorily deal with her, but that he really had something to do. Raven, I want to try out this ability of mine, so can you take me to a suitable place? Rorschach made a request to Raven. Anyway, his heat rays were not a shameful secret, so he was naturally not afraid to show them in front of Mystique. Of course, no problem. It's best to find an open, larger place. Rorschach, Charles's family lacks everything except space. Raven finally brought Rorschach to the playground in Charles's yard. Yes, can you believe that there is actually a playground in Charles's yard? This space is definitely enough. Rorschach took a deep breath, and the energy in his body began to gather in his eyes, condensing into two blazing beams of light. Swish! Two heat rays burst out from Rorschach's eyes. Oh, Raven couldn't help but cover her mouth and exclaimed. Even though she was a mutant, the scene of shooting lasers from the eyes was very shocking to her. Even if she didn't try the intensity of the ray herself, just by feeling it from the side, Raven could feel the powerful energy contained in it. Chi-chi! Two rays illuminated the night sky, like two dazzling pillars, so dazzling and gorgeous. In Rorschach's eyes at this moment, it was the most beautiful beam in the world. It's just a pity that the heat ray can only last for 5 seconds, and it won't work if it's longer. Rorschach's eyes can't stand it. But considering that his progress has only unlocked 5% so far, Rorschach was relieved again. 5 seconds is just the beginning, that's all. Next, Rorschach found some stones for testing. The hard stone is like paper in front of the heat ray, so fragile that Rorschach can easily smash it into slag. Yes, the heat ray will be an important trump card of mine. Rorschach was very satisfied with this. Rorschach, you have become stronger again, you are already the strongest among all of us. Raven said with great emotion. In the past, everyone was actually quite optimistic about Alex's potential. After all, the opponent's energy ring was really strong. Even Rorschach didn't dare to fight him easily. But now, Rorschach also has a comparable attack method. In addition, Charles's ability is completely ineffective against Rorschach, so there is no doubt that Rorschach is the strongest. The strongest. Rorschach was not happy at all despite being praised by Raven, because he knew that he was far from reaching this level. Let alone the fact that there are so many super villains in the world who are capable of destroying a city and the earth, even among the mutants, Rorschach is far from being the strongest. Let alone the Black Emperor Rorschach who just fought, he cannot be killed now. Professor X will grow up in the future and will be a great threat to Rorschach. Of course, only the ability factor is considered. Not to mention the super powerful Phoenix Girl, Rorschach is nothing in front of the opponent's Phoenix Force. In addition, there is Apocalypse who is sleeping in a certain underground, etc. Rorschach still has a long way to go. Raven, I'm far from strong enough. Rorschach shook his head at Mystique and said seriously, if I were strong enough, it would not be me who ran away, but Shaw. Rorschach, you have done a good job. You resisted Shaw forcefully and protected everyone. And us. At this point, Mystique couldn't help but laugh at herself. We didn't do anything. The only thing we did was to be a group of frightened rabbits. ... You can actually shoot lasers out of your eyes. Little guy, how many secrets do you have? Taj. The Ancient One sat in the Supreme Hall of the temple, and in front of her was a mirror constructed by magic. The mirror showed the scene of Rorschach conducting a heat ray experiment at Charles's house. But the Ancient One just looked at Rorschach in the mirror, with a look of interest on his face. Interesting, I haven't experienced the feeling of surprise for a long time. Swish. Then the Ancient One waved his right hand gently, and the mirror disappeared. It was as if it had never appeared. Of course, Rorschach could not detect any of the Ancient One's peeping. Not to mention him now. Even if the Homelander really traveled through the universe, he would probably not be the opponent of the old woman. Raven, let's go back. Rorschach did not continue such a heavy topic with Mystique. He greeted Mystique. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry for breaking the stone in Charles's yard. Looking at the big stone that was broken into slag, Rorschach shrugged again. I believe Charles would be very relieved if he knew why the stone was broken. Mystique said indifferently. This time when he returned to the room, Rorschach had no more worries, lying on the bed, and soon fell asleep. Ah, it's a new day. After waking up, Rorschach stretched comfortably. He casually opened the curtains, and the soft sunlight outside came in through the window. Looking out, he saw the green lawn and the colorful garden next to it. It felt like watching a Lizichi video. After a simple wash, Rorschach went downstairs and came to the living room. But he saw that the hall was already full of people, including Mystique, Raven, Beast Hank, Siren, Destroyer and other mutants. Everyone sat together, and the atmosphere was visibly dull. Rorschach, you are really amazing, you can really sleep. Alex the Destroyer really felt in awe of Rorschach. Such a big thing happened yesterday, and this person really didn't take it to heart. But thinking about Rorschach's powerful strength, well, the Destroyer felt that he was too narrow-minded. What are you talking about? Rorschach naturally sat down in an empty seat. We are thinking whether we should go out to get some information. The angel who was originally sitting with his legs crossed sat up straight and said to Rorschach. Although everyone has temporarily escaped from the Black Emperor's hands and has spent a night here without any problem, who knows if the Black Emperor has found any clues? What if the Black Emperor finds out here again? Wouldn't everyone be lambs to be slaughtered? But it is precisely for the same reason that everyone dares not go out rashly. What if the Black Emperor really finds out here? It doesn't matter if they go out, but what if they are discovered? Even the CIA base has been cleaned up, and no one dares to face the Black Emperor again. But hiding here like this and turning a deaf ear to the outside world is obviously not a solution. I'll go. Mystique Raven stood up at this time and volunteered. I grew up here, I know where I can get intelligence. Raven. Hank immediately expressed his concern. When Raven came to the CIA base, Hank had some ambiguous relationship with the other party. Of course, Hank didn't know that Raven had cheated last night. This is too dangerous, what if you run into that guy? Hank hesitated, he didn't quite agree with this. Hank, I know this area, I can also become someone else, you and I know that I am the most suitable candidate. Mystique has made a decision, her tone is quite certain. Everything that happened last night has unconsciously made Raven grow up a little. Raven, you shouldn't bear all this for us. Alex the Destroyer also expressed opposition. He felt it was too shameful for so many people to rely on a woman who had no fighting ability. Alex, Raven is right. Darwin was much calmer, and he understood that this was indeed the best plan. Although he also had some worries and concerns, it was true that there was no better way. Don't worry, everyone, I'll go with Ruiwen. Luo Xia stood up at this time. How can I trigger the mission if I'm hiding in the house? He didn't believe that a mission would come to his door again like yesterday. And if you walk around outside, the chances will naturally be much higher. It would be great if Rorschach goes with us. Siren, this heartless guy, immediately slapped his thigh and laughed. No one else raised any objections. This is truly the best combination. After making the decision, Luo Xia and Ruiwen didn't hesitate too much. After some simple preparations, we set off directly. Mystique used her powers to transform into a middle-aged man. As for Rorschach, although he felt it was unnecessary, he still followed everyone's requirements and put on a simple disguise, wearing a hat. At the same time, I also found an old windbreaker that belonged to Charles and put it on. Wow, Rorschach. Raven looked at Rorschach up and down and felt very satisfied. I never thought that Charles's clothes would fit you so well. It's perfect. Really? Rorschach raised an eyebrow. Which one is more handsome, Charles or me? Of course it's you. Raven winked at Luo Xia. Ruiwen, with your expression like this, you look like a pervert. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.